There is a particular quiet that comes from returning to a show you already know by heart. The mystery has already been solved, the summer has already ended, and every twist that once startled you has softened into something closer to a memory of a place you used to live. You are not watching Gravity Falls tonight so much as resting inside it. The falls still fall, the same wind moves through the same pines, and the voices you have heard 100 times arrive like people you do not have to answer. Grunkle Stan mutters at the register. Mabel laughs at nothing. Dipper turns another page in a book he was never meant to find. None of it asks anything of you, and that is exactly why it works when the rest of the day has finally let go. Underneath that easy surface, though, the show was built to be read twice. Alex Hirsch buried a cipher into nearly every frame, cryptograms in the end credits, symbols on the wall, whispers that reverse into warnings, a puzzle for anyone patient enough to look. Tonight is a slow walk through all of it. Every code decoded, every hidden message translated back into plain words, every small thing tucked into a corner of a corner and left there for you to find. You do not need to solve anything. You only need to listen while it is solved for you. Welcome to Pine Hat. This is a place for the long, unhurried hours, for stories told softly enough to follow or gentle enough to sleep through, whichever the night decides. So settle in, turn the lights down or off. Let the pillow take the weight of your head and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been sitting all day. There's nothing to keep up with here, and nowhere else you need to be. Stay as long as you can, drift whenever you're ready, and let the town of Gravity Falls give up its secrets while you rest. To understand why one animated show turned its closing credits into a decade-spanning puzzle, you have to begin with the person who made it and with a childhood spent in front of games that asked to be solved rather than simply watched. Alex Hirsch was born on the 18th of June, 1985, in Piedmont, California. He grew up alongside a twin sister named Ariel, whose personality would later feed into the character of Mabel Pines, the relentlessly warm and slightly chaotic girl who anchors the show's emotional center. That detail matters more than it first appears. A person who grows up as one half of a pair tends to think in mirrors, in doubles, in the idea that any single surface might have another version of itself hidden just behind it. Consider how much of Gravity Falls turns on twins, on secrets, on the notion that the thing you're looking at is not the whole thing. Before there was a town called Gravity Falls, there was a young man learning the mechanics of storytelling in a formal way. Hirsch earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from CalArts, the California Institute of the Arts, graduating in 2007. That schooling placed him inside a long tradition of American animation, a pipeline that has fed studios for generations, and it gave him the technical vocabulary of storyboarding and character design that he would need later. But a degree teaches craft, not obsession. The obsession came from somewhere else, from a habit formed long before any classroom. He has said that growing up playing puzzle games, games in the lineage of MYST, fueled his love of puzzles. That is a specific inheritance to name. MYST is a game built almost entirely out of patience and observation, a game where you wander a quiet island, and the reward is not action but comprehension, the slow assembly of meaning from scattered clues. Hirsch told an outlet called Fashionable Tinfoil Accessories that doing a puzzle, as he put it, in the real world was too tempting to pass up. Hold on to that phrase for a moment. The real world, not a puzzle inside a game where puzzles are expected and contained, but a puzzle smuggled out into ordinary life, into the places where people are not looking for one. That instinct, the desire to hide something solvable inside something that appears finished, is the seed of everything this chapter is about. Between school and stardom came the working years, the apprenticeship that every creator passes through and few audiences ever see. Hirsch worked as a writer and storyboard artist on Cartoon Network's series The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack across 2008 and 2009. It was a strange, elastic, visually adventurous show, and it shared its rooms with a generation of animators who would go on to define the era. After that, he co-developed a series for the Disney Channel called Fish Hooks, which ran from 2010 to 2014. These were the years of learning how a show actually gets made, how a pitch becomes a pipeline, how an idea survives contact with a network. By the time Hirsch had his own show to build, he was not a newcomer. He knew exactly how much a creator could quietly get away with, inside a system designed to keep everything simple and safe for children, which brings us to the pilot. The first episode of Gravity Falls is called Tourist Trapped. Hirsch wrote it, and it was directed by John Oshima. It arrived as a preview on the Disney Channel on the 15th of June, 2012, and drew an audience of roughly 3.4 million viewers before the series proper debuted on that same network 2 weeks later, on the 29th of June. Think about that sequence for a second. Millions of people, most of them children, and the parents watching beside them, sat down for what looked like a bright new cartoon about two kids sent to spend a summer with their great uncle in a tourist trap in the Oregon woods. They watched the story, they laughed at the jokes, and then the credits rolled, and almost none of them noticed that the show had just handed them its first secret. Because the end credits of Tourist Trapped, the very first episode of the entire series, contained a line of encoded text. It read, in its scrambled form, Jofrf WR Judalb Idov. To an ordinary viewer, it is noise, a string of capital letters that looks like a typo or a glitch. But it is not noise, it is a Caesar cipher, one of the oldest and simplest forms of encryption known, in which every letter is shifted a fixed number of places along the alphabet. Shift each of those letters back by 3, and the noise resolves into a sentence. Welcome to Gravity Falls. The show's first hidden message is fittingly an invitation. Before you have solved anything, before you even know there is anything to solve, the credits are already welcoming you into a place that rewards attention. There is something almost gentle about that choice as an opening move. A Caesar cipher shifted by 3 is the training wheels of cryptography. It is the cipher a child might invent on a rainy afternoon, the one that appears in the very first chapter of any book about codes. Hirsch did not begin with something impossible. He began with something a curious 11-year-old could crack with a pencil and a little stubbornness. The first message is easy on purpose because its real job is not to be hard. Its real job is to teach the audience that the credits are worth reading, that the show is playing a longer game, that the surface is never the full story. Remember the twin, the mirror, the version hidden just behind. And this was not a one-time flourish. The cryptogram in the pilot's credits was the opening note of a practice that held for the entire original run. Every single episode of Gravity Falls included a cryptogram hidden in its end credits. The device started with the pilot and continued without a single break across all 40 episodes. 40 episodes, 40 hidden messages, a small encrypted line tucked into the place most shows treat as a legal formality, the scroll of names that viewers are trained to ignore. Hirsch took the flimsiest few seconds of television and made them the one part of the show you could not afford to skip. To keep the game fair, at least at first, the show even told you how to play. The opening theme song, the one that plays before each episode, contains a whispered message recorded backward. Reverse the audio, and during the seasons that used the Caesar cipher, the whisper says, 3 letters back. That is the instruction. That is the key, hidden in plain hearing, spoken in reverse, so that only someone who thought to flip the audio would ever receive it. The show is not merely hiding puzzles. It is hiding the tools to solve those puzzles inside other puzzles, layering the secret so that finding one part sends you looking for the next. A viewer who reversed that whisper had earned the right to read the credits, and the credits in turn had things to say. The best known of those things was not in the credits at all. It was in the main title sequence itself. Embedded in the opening, decoded with that same 3 letters backshift the reversed whisper hands you, is a cryptogram that reads, Stan is not what he seems. Sit with what that means. The single most important secret of the show's first season, the mystery that the whole plot slowly circles, the truth about the gruff old man running the mystery shack was hidden in the opening credits of every episode from the very beginning. It was there before you knew to look for it. Anyone who cracked the code was, in effect, told the ending while they were still watching the start. The show was daring its most attentive viewers to spoil themselves and trusting that the pleasure of solving would outweigh the loss of surprise. That is an extraordinary amount of faith to place in an audience, and it tells you exactly what kind of viewer Hirsch was building the show for. As the series went on, the codes refused to stay still. The Caesar cipher carried the first 6 episodes, and then the scheme began to evolve, as if the show were quietly leveling up alongside the viewers who had learned to keep pace with it. Episodes 7 through 13 switched to an @bash cipher, which reverses the alphabet so that the first letter stands in for the last, the second for the second to last, and so on. Then episodes 14 through 19 moved to A1Z26, a numeric substitution where each letter is simply replaced by its position in the alphabet, so that the message arrives as a string of numbers. And from episode 21 through to the finale, the show adopted a keyed visionaire cipher, a genuinely sturdy piece of classical cryptography that requires not just a method, but a secret word to unlock. The progression is deliberate. A viewer who started with the pilot and stayed to the end was gradually trained cipher by cipher from the schoolyard trick of shifting 3 letters to a system that had, for centuries, been considered unbreakable. The show grew harder because its audience grew smarter, and it assumed they would. It would be incomplete to talk about the codes without talking about the character who became their face, because his very name is a small cipher of its own kind. Bill Cipher is the show's central antagonist, a floating yellow triangle with a single eye, and Hirsch has described exactly how he arrived at him. He imagined taking the triangle from the back of a United States dollar bill, the famous eye inside a pyramid known as the Eye of Providence, and lifting it off the currency entirely. In his own words, he asked what if he took the triangle off the back of the dollar bill, dressed him up in a top hat and stupid little arms and legs, and named him Bill after the dollar. There's a lovely logic to that. A show obsessed with hidden meanings built its villain out of the quietest conspiratorial image in American life, the symbol that has launched 1,000 theories, printed on the money in every pocket. And then it named him after the very object it stole him from. Even the character design is a puzzle whose answer is hiding in your wallet. The obsession with real-world puzzles, the one Hirsch confessed to when he said a real-world puzzle was too much to resist, did not end when the series did. After the finale, Hirsch personally organized something he called Cipher Hunt, and it is perhaps the purest expression of that childhood instinct made real. Cipher Hunt was an international scavenger hunt that ran in the summer of 2016 from the 20th of July to the 2nd of August. It sent fans out into the physical world to decode clues planted at actual locations, a chain of puzzles that stretched across countries, all of it leading toward a single hidden object. This was not a marketing campaign handed down by a corporation. Hirsch ran it independently, without official Disney involvement, working with the show's art director Ian Worrell, who mapped out the clue locations while Hirsch himself crafted the tricky encoded messages. Picture the shape of that. The man who had spent 40 episodes hiding codes in the credits of a children's cartoon, now hiding codes in the streets and forests of the real world, with no network telling him to, simply because the temptation was, as he had always said, too great to pass up. The object at the end of the hunt was a statue of Bill Cipher himself, that dollar bill triangle given 3 dimensions. It was constructed out of durable plexiglass by the prop master Fawn Davis, and then it was buried in a forest near Reedsport, Oregon, waiting. The state of Oregon, of course, is the real-world home of the fictional Gravity Falls, so the statue was hidden in something close to the show's own soil. On that final day, a user on Twitter found it. Weeks of decoding, a trail of ciphers spanning the globe, and it ended with a person kneeling in the Oregon woods, brushing away dirt to uncover a triangle that had begun its life as an idea lifted off a banknote. The puzzle had finally, fully escaped the screen. That escape was always the point. Hirsch has explained his philosophy about the show's unresolved codes and lingering mysteries in a way that reframes the entire practice. He has said that he likes stories that complete their emotional arcs but still leave some threads to chew on, that this gives the fans something to theorize about, and that it gives him a window back into that world if he ever chooses to return to it. Read carefully, that is not the statement of someone who left puzzles unsolved out of carelessness. It is a deliberate design. The emotional story ends cleanly and completely so that no one feels cheated of the thing that actually matters. But the codes, the ciphers, the little unresolved corners, those are left deliberately ajar, both a gift to the audience and a door the creator keeps for himself. So the show that welcomed you with a shifted 3-letter greeting in its very first credits was, from the outset, a different kind of object than it appeared to be. It looked like a cartoon about a boy and a girl and a summer in the woods. It was, underneath, a decade-long argument for paying attention, for reading the parts everyone skips, for trusting that the surface of a thing and the truth of a thing are rarely the same. All of it traces back to a twin from Piedmont who grew up solving quiet puzzles on a screen and decided, when he finally had a show of his own, that a puzzle loose in the real world was impossible to resist. He hid a cipher in the first episode's credits before he could have known whether anyone would ever bother to look. And people looked. That, in the end, is the whole story of how the code obsession began. Someone believed the audience would care enough to decode a welcome, and the audience proved him right. Consider the simplest of the 3 ciphers, the one that opens the series and asks the least of you. For the first 6 episodes of Season 1, the end credits close on a line of scrambled capital letters, and the method hiding underneath them is one of the oldest tricks in the history of secret writing. It is called the Caesar Cipher, and it works by sliding the alphabet along a fixed number of steps. In Gravity Falls, that number is 3. To hide a message, every letter is pushed forward 3 places so that A becomes D and B becomes E, and so on, around the ring of the alphabet. To read the message back, you simply reverse the motion and walk each letter 3 places in the other direction. That is the whole secret. There is no key to find, no clue to hunt for. If you know the show shifts by 3, you already hold everything you need. Watch it happen in the pilot. The credits give you the string that reads, in raw form, as Jofref WR Judulb Iduv, which looks like nothing at all. Take the first letter Z and count 3 steps backward through the alphabet, and you land on W. Do the same with the H that follows and you reach E. The O slides back to L. Carry that patient subtraction across the entire line, letter after letter, and the noise resolves into a sentence that is almost gentle in how plainly it speaks. Welcome to Gravity Falls. Think about what that means as a first move. The very first coded message the show ever hid was not a warning or a riddle, but an invitation. A door held open for anyone curious enough to do the small arithmetic. The second episode keeps the same shift and uses it for something lighter. The credits of The Legend of the Gobblewonker decode by that same backward count of 3 into a mock preview that announces a return to a place it calls Butt Island. It is a joke, and a small one, but it tells you something about the register the show is working in. The Cipher is not only a vault for lore, it is also a place to be silly where the young audience will not immediately notice. A private channel running under the credits where the writers can wink at whoever's paying attention. Then, with the 7th episode, the rules quietly change, and this is the first thing that makes the Gravity Falls credits more than a novelty. The Caesar shift is retired and a new method takes its place for episodes 7 through 13. This one is called @bash, and it does not slide the alphabet so much as fold it in half. Under @bash, the first letter and the last letter trade places. A becomes Z, B becomes Axfoy, C becomes X. Each letter is mapped to its mirror image, so that a letter sitting in a given position is swapped for the letter the same distance from the opposite end. Stated as a rule, a letter at position P is replaced by the letter at position 27 minus P, which is only a formal way of saying that the alphabet has been turned around and laid against itself. What makes @bash elegant is that the process is its own undoing. There is no separate step for encoding and decoding. You apply the same mirror both times, and the mirror of the mirror returns you home. The episode Irrational Treasure shows the fold at work. Its credits read in coded form as V Kofurif Givnjov. Take that first standalone V and find its mirror, which is E. Take the K and mirror it to P, continue letter by letter, and a name emerges, a pun, sitting on the founding language of the United States. E pluribus trembli. The show has taken the Latin motto that appears on American currency, out of many, one, and bent it into a character, and it has buried that gag inside a cipher that most viewers will never open. That is the flavor of the @bash run. The messages tend to reward the kind of attention that lingers. The same mirror produces the strangest entry in the whole season from the episode Double Dipper. Decoded, it announces that a character called Paper Jam Dipper says something, and then it dissolves on purpose into a run of nonsense syllables. Paper Jam Dipper says, Auchskadzada. There is no hidden meaning waiting in that tale of letters. The gibberish is the point. Someone sat down and encoded deliberate nonsense so that a decoder would do all the careful work of folding the alphabet only to arrive at a scream. It is a joke aimed squarely at the most dedicated members of the audience, the ones most likely to feel the small deflation, and it is funnier for how much effort it costs to reach. Other @bash messages play it straighter and warmer. The episode Fight Fighters hides a line that decodes to "Sorry, Dipper, but your Wendy is in another castle," which lifts the famous consolation from the old Super Mario games, the message that greeted a player who had fought through a level only to be told the princess was elsewhere. Here it is turned toward Dipper, and his hopeless crush, a small cruelty softened by the reference. And the episode Little Dipper folds up a single flat sentence that reads, "Once mirrored, The invisible wizard is watching. No punchline, no reference, just a line of quiet menace dropped into the credits and left there, the kind of thing that sits differently at night than it does in daylight. With the 14th episode, the method changes a third time, and the new one abandons letters for numbers. For episodes 14 through 19, the credits use a scheme called A1Z26, which is exactly as literal as its name. Each letter is written as its position in the alphabet, so that A is 1 and B is 2, and the count runs all the way to Z at 26. On the screen, the message appears as a row of numbers, with individual numbers separated by hyphens so you can tell where one letter ends and the next begins, and with gaps between the groups to mark where one word ends and another starts. There is nothing to shift and nothing to fold. You only have to count. It is the plainest of the three once you know what you're looking at, and yet a wall of hyphenated numbers is oddly forbidding at first glance, which may be exactly why the show saved it for the back third of the season. Step back and the pattern of the whole season comes into view because the changes were not random. They ran on a fixed schedule that the writers held to across the year. The Caesar Cipher covered episodes 1 through 6. Atbash took over for 7 through 13. That numeric method carried 14 through 19. And then, for the 20th episode, the season finale, the show did something it had not done before. It combined them. That finale is Gideon Rises, and its credits do not settle on a single method. They present a sequence of numbers, and if you treat those numbers the way you learned to during that numeric stretch and convert them into letters, you do not get a message. You get more scrambled letters. So you take those letters and apply Atbash, folding the alphabet against itself, and still the words do not arrive. Only when you take that result and run it through the Caesar shift as well, the third method stacked on the first two, does the sentence finally surface. 3 ciphers layered in order, A1Z26, then Atbash, then Caesar, each undoing one skin of the disguise, and underneath them all a single instruction. Search for the blind eye. The finale rewards the viewer who learned every technique the season taught by demanding all 3 at once, and the message it hands back is not a joke but a lead, a thread pointing deeper into the show's mythology. There is one more layer folded into that first season, and it is the kind of thing that turns a set of gags into a design. According to the Gravity Falls wiki, that little poem does not come from the 6 Caesar messages in the first 6 episodes. Those stay separate one-off jokes, one about Stan, one about a haunted vent, one about a return trip to Butt Island. It actually comes from a different set of cryptograms altogether, the ones tucked into the animated shorts known as Dipper's Guide to the Unexplained. It runs from the first until the last, search the codes of credits past, 1 means 1, so search them all, and then it closes on the same words the pilot opened with, Welcome to Gravity Falls. Think about the patience of that. The show buried instructions for reading the show inside the show, and it wrote those instructions so that they only assembled into sense once you had gone back and cracked every early episode in turn. The opening greeting is also the closing line of a hidden verse, and the verse is a set of directions for finding itself. Then Season 1 ends, and with the premiere of Season 2, the entire system is retired. Starting with the episode Scary-oke, the show stopped rotating between Caesar and Atbash and A1Z26. Those 3 had been, in a sense, training. Each was breakable once you knew its single fixed rule, and by the finale, the audience had been taught all 3 well enough to stack them. So the writers took the training wheels off. For the rest of the series, the credits use the Visionaire Cipher, which is a genuine step up in difficulty. A Visionaire Cipher does not shift by one fixed amount. It shifts by a repeating keyword so that each letter of the message is moved by a different distance depending on which letter of the keyword sits above it. Without the keyword, the message resists you and there is no counting your way in. That is why, from the second season onward, a new keyword was hidden every week, tucked into a freeze frame or dropped somewhere inside the episode itself, so that solving the credits now required watching the episode closely enough to find the key first. Scary-oke is where this begins. It is the first episode of Season 2 and the 21st episode of the series overall, and it first aired on the 1st of August 2014. Its credits carry the coded line Smofska JDFV, which is unreadable on its own. The keyword that unlocks it is whittle, a word the episode hands you if you know where to look. And once you lay that keyword against the cipher text and work the visionaire shifts back out, the two words resolve into a greeting. Welcome back. It is hard not to admire the symmetry of that choice. The very first cipher of the series, hidden under the Caesar shift in the pilot, welcomed you to Gravity Falls. The first cipher of the second season, now guarded by a keyword and a tougher method, welcomes you back. The show that spent an entire year teaching its audience to read 3 simple codes marks the start of its harder codes by speaking, once again, in the plainest possible words. Everything around the message has grown more difficult. The message itself has stayed kind. And that, more than any single decoded joke, is what the end cards of Gravity Falls were quietly doing all along, building a small school in the space after the story ended, and trusting that some of you would stay behind to attend it. There is a particular kind of trust a show asks of you in its first episode, and Gravity Falls asks for it in a way most animated programs never bother to. Consider the situation on the surface. 2 12-year-old twins, Dipper and Mabel Pines, arrive in the town of Gravity Falls, Oregon, to spend the summer with their great uncle, the man they call Grunkle Stan. Dipper looks around at the place and describes it, in effect, as sleepy. That is the word the writers put in his mouth. Sleepy. A quiet town where nothing happens, the sort of place a bored child is sent when the adults in his life have run out of better ideas. The twins are promptly put to work at Stan's tourist trap business, the Mystery Shack, which is exactly the kind of establishment that sells the illusion of the strange to people who will never look closely enough to find the real thing. And here is the first act of trust the show performs. It tells you the town is sleepy and it is lying to you, and it has already hidden the proof that it is lying in plain sight in a place it fully expects you to ignore. Follow Dipper into the woods. He has been sent to hang advertising signs in what the episode calls the spooky part of the forest, which is a small joke in itself because a tourist trap needs its spookiness clearly labeled and roped off. While he is working, he discovers a tree. Not an ordinary tree. This one is metal and it is hollow, and when you stop to weigh what that implies, the sleepy town begins to feel a little less sleepy. Someone built this. Someone disguised a machine as a piece of the ordinary landscape and left it standing among the real trees, waiting. Inside the hollow trunk, Dipper finds an old-looking electronic device, and one of its 2 wires has been severed. That detail matters more than it seems. A cut wire is not decay. A cut wire is a decision. Somebody wanted this thing to stop working, or wanted it to work only halfway. And that small act of sabotage is the first evidence the twins ever encounter that the history of this town was shaped by human hands making deliberate choices. Dipper does what any curious child does. He fiddles with the switches. And in doing so, he triggers something the builder of that device had connected to it long ago. A trapdoor opens in the ground nearby, startling a goat named Gompers who happens to be standing close to it. There is a gentleness to that image that is worth sitting with. The machinery of an enormous secret grinds into motion, and the only witness besides the boy is a goat, mildly inconvenienced, who wanders off and thinks nothing more of it. This is how Gravity Falls tends to reveal itself, not with fanfare, but at the edge of an animal's afternoon in a corner of the frame. Beneath the trapdoor, Dipper finds the object that will define everything that follows. A journal. Not a diary of feelings, but a record, full of facts and notes about the creatures of Gravity Falls, and threaded through those notes, something heavier. The journal hints at a cover-up, a concealment reaching into the town's past and continuing into its present. Read that again slowly, past and present. Whoever wrote this book understood that the strangeness of Gravity Falls was not merely historical, not a thing that happened once and ended. It was ongoing. Somebody was still keeping the secret on the day Dipper opened the book. And the boy who had just described his summer home as sleepy was now holding the evidence that the word was a costume the town was wearing. That is the story on the level of plot. But the pilot episode of Gravity Falls, which carries the title Tourist Trapped, is doing something underneath the plot, in the credits, in the frame, in the sound. This is the layer that the channel's other work has circled without ever landing on directly, and it is the true subject of this chapter. Because the very first episode does not simply tell you a secret exists, it hands you a locked box and, in the same breath, hides the key where only a certain kind of patient viewer will ever find it. When the end credits of Tourist Trap roll, a line of letters appears on the screen. ZHOFRPH, and then a short word, and then a longer one. Written out, it reads Jo Furf WR Judilb Edov. To almost everyone watching in the ordinary way, that string is decoration, a bit of spooky texture, the visual equivalent of a cobweb draped over the corner of the screen. It means nothing. It is meant to look like it means nothing. This is the first cryptogram of the entire series, and the show does not stop to explain it, does not point at it, does not slow down. It simply lets it sit there for a few seconds and then lets the screen go dark. But it is not nothing. It is a message enciphered with one of the oldest tricks in the history of secret writing, the Caesar cipher, named for the Roman practice of shifting each letter of the alphabet a set distance down the line. In this case, the shift is 3 letters back. To read it, you take each letter and move it 3 steps earlier in the alphabet, which means that A becomes X, B becomes Y, and C becomes Z, wrapping around the end as you go. Apply that patient arithmetic to Jo Farf WR Judel B Adove, and the fog lifts. The letters resolve into words. Welcome to Gravity Falls, the town's own greeting, encrypted. The show welcomes you, and it does so in code, and the very first thing it ever says to you in secret is the same thing the road sign says out loud, which is a joke and a promise at once. Everything here is exactly what it appears to be, and also nothing here is. Now hold on to the question that any thoughtful viewer would ask at this point. How is anyone supposed to know that the shift is 3 letters back? A Caesar cipher is only simple if you already know the key. Without it, you are left guessing among 25 possibilities, and the show has given you no obvious instruction. This is where Gravity Falls does something that borders on the mischievous, something that reveals just how much faith it placed in its audience from the beginning. The key is hidden too. It is not printed anywhere. It is spoken. At the very end of the show's opening theme song, in the last moment of the intro, there is a whisper, and that whisper has been played backwards. Reverse it, and it tells you what to do. 3 letters back. The instruction for reading the secret is itself a secret, tucked into a sound most people never notice, and reversed so that even the people who do notice hear only a smear of noise until they think to turn it around. Think about the sheer layering of that. To read the first cryptogram, you must first suspect that the credits contain a message at all. Then you must recognize it as a cipher. Then you must find the key, which is not written but whispered, and not whispered plainly but reversed. And only when you have peeled back all of those layers do you arrive at the words, "Welcome to Gravity Falls," which is to say, you arrive at the beginning, at the doorstep, at hello. The show made you work through 3 concealments simply to be greeted. And that same 3 letters back shift then unlocks the credits cryptograms across the first 6 episodes of the season, so that the reward for solving one is the ability to solve the next 5. It taught you the alphabet of its own secrecy in the pilot, and then trusted you to keep using it. My own view, having turned this over for a long time, is that this is the most honest thing the show ever did. Most stories that deal in hidden truths cheat a little. They reveal their mysteries on a schedule that flatters the audience, doling out answers at the moment of maximum drama. Gravity Falls, in its first episode, did the opposite. It buried a real, solvable message in the credits and a real findable key in the theme song, and then it walked away and said nothing, content to let the code sit unread for as long as it took someone to care enough to crack it. The secret did not depend on your attention to exist. It was simply true, whether you looked or not. That is a rare posture for a piece of children's television, and it is the reason the show rewards the kind of slow, repeated late-night viewing that most programs cannot survive. But the credits are only one place the pilot hides something in plain sight. There is another, and it is more audacious because it is not a code at all. It is a face. Return to the attic of the Mystery Shack, to the scene in which Dipper sits and reads the journal he pulled from beneath the trapdoor. It is a quiet moment, a boy alone with a book, absorbing the notes and the drawings, beginning to understand what he has found. The attic has a red stained glass window, and light comes through it, and in that light, cast as a reflection, a silhouette appears. A triangle, a single eye. The shape is unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for, and utterly invisible to anyone who does not. It is Bill Cipher, and in the pilot episode of Gravity Falls, in the first 20 or so minutes the show ever aired, before the audience had any reason to know that name, before Bill had spoken a single word or been introduced as anyone at all. His silhouette is already there, thrown against the wall of the room where the mystery begins. That reflection is not an accident, and it is not the only one. It is one of several background cameos the series planted through the first season, quiet appearances of a character the audience could not yet recognize, seeded into the corners of episodes long before his identity was revealed. To understand how bold that is, you have to understand when the reveal actually came. Bill Cipher's first official on-screen appearance as a character, as a being who acts and speaks and matters to the plot, did not happen until the episode Dreamscaperers, the second to last episode of the first season, which aired on the Disney Channel late in that first season's run. In that episode, he is summoned by Lyle Gideon to enter Grunkle Stan's mind and steal the combination and the deed to the safe inside the Mystery Shack. That is his entrance. That is the moment the audience is formally introduced. Nearly an entire season after his silhouette first slid across the attic wall. Sit with the distance between those 2 points, the pilot, where his reflection appears unnamed and unexplained, and the penultimate episode of the season, where he finally arrives as himself. The writers knew from the very first episode exactly who Bill Cipher was and what he would become, and they left his shadow in the pilot as a kind of signature, a mark that says, "This was all planned all along." The cover up the journal hints at, the secret that reaches from the town's past into its present has a face, and that face was watching the boy read about it from the moment he opened the book. And the attic is not the only place he hides before the reveal. In the later first season episode Irrational Treasure, Bill appears again, this time as an image printed on the back of a playing card. Another cameo, another background detail, another instance of Gravity Falls, placing him where the plot does not require him. Simply because it could, simply because the people making it enjoyed knowing something the audience did not yet know. A silhouette in the pilot, a playing card partway through the season. And only then, near the end, the summoning in Dreamscaperers. The character was assembled in the audience's peripheral vision, appearance by appearance, long before he was ever named. It helps to understand why his shape is so easy to hide and so hard to unsee once you know it. Bill Cipher's visual design is a single yellow triangle with one eye, resembling nothing so much as the Eye of Providence. The eye set within a triangle that appears on the back of the United States $1 bill. He wears a top hat and a bow tie, small human affectations pinned to an inhuman geometry. His whole look was built out of that pyramid and eye imagery, the symbol that hundreds of millions of people carry in their pockets every day without ever really seeing it. Which is the perfect origin for a character whose entire method in this cartoon is to be present and unnoticed. He is made from a thing you look at constantly and never look at closely, and he behaves the same way, sitting in the reflection of a window, on the back of a card, at the edge of a frame, hiding in the ordinary exactly the way a metal tree hides among the real ones. And there is one more place he waits, a place so obvious that it circles back around to being hidden, which is the opening title sequence itself. Every episode of Gravity Falls ends its intro on a freeze frame. Bill Cipher held still, encircled by a ring of small symbols, figures that look like the pieces of a Zodiac. That image was in the intro from the very start of the cartoon. Not added later, not slipped in once he became important. It was there in the pilot, playing before every episode, the last thing the opening ever showed you. And what those symbols meant, why they surrounded him, what that ring of figures was for, would not be explained until much later, when the series revealed the so-called Zodiac Wheel. As a prophecy, a formula of 10 allies whose linked hands could defeat Bill. That answer was seasons away. But the question was printed on the screen before every single episode from the beginning, the way the answer to the first cryptogram was already the town's own greeting, the way Bill's shadow was already on the attic wall. This is the shape of the whole show, visible fully formed in its first episode, a sleepy town that is not sleepy. A greeting written in code with its key whispered backwards, a journal that admits the past reaches into the present, and a triangle with one eye cast in red light against a wall, watching a 12-year-old boy begin to read, already knowing everything the boy has just started to learn. the story of Bill Cipher does not begin where the program tells you it begins. His name arrives on screen in Dreamscapers, the 19th episode of Season 1, first broadcast in July of 2013 as the opening half of the season finale. That is the moment the series formally introduces him, the moment he is allowed to speak and scheme and be recognized as a character with a name. And yet by the time that episode aired, this series had already been quietly living with him for more than a year. The premiere, Tourist Trap, had gone out in June of 2012, roughly 13 months earlier. So the question worth sitting with on this slow walk backward through Season 1 is not when Bill appeared. It is how long he had been in the room before anyone told you to look. Consider the opening titles first, because they are the piece almost no one watches closely. Every episode of Gravity Falls runs the same title sequence, and every episode ends that sequence the same way, with a brief flash of a wheel of symbols and a triangle seated at the center of it. That flash was present from the earliest episodes, months before Bill is ever named. Picture what that does to the ordinary viewer. You would have watched the same few frames dozens of times, week after week, your eye sliding past the triangle the way it slides past a logo, never once suspecting that the series was showing you its final villain in the very first seconds of every installment. The reveal was not hidden in some obscure corner. It was in the credits, the most repeated footage in the entire series, hiding in the one place familiarity teaches you to ignore. The premiere itself doubles down on this. When Dipper first opens the third journal, the book that drives the whole mystery of the town, there is a shot of Bill's symbol wheel so brief that it qualifies as blink and you will miss it. And the wheel is not empty decoration. Around its edge sit icons that stand in for other characters, including a pine tree hat for Dipper and a shooting star sweater for Mabel. So in the first episode, in a single fraction of a second, Gravity Falls lays out a diagram that quietly assigns the twins their places in a design they do not yet understand and cannot yet read. Dipper is looking at the journal to solve the town. The journal, in that instant, is looking back, holding a map of relationships that will not pay off for years. There is more in that same premiere, and it is the moment I find most subtly unsettling. While Dipper reads the journal in the attic, Bill's silhouette appears reflected in the red, stained glass window of the Mystery Shack. Not the wheel, not an icon on a page, but the shape of the thing itself, thrown across colored glass as if it were standing in the room and catching the light. Picture the geometry of that. A boy is bent over a book about monsters, and the monster he has not met yet is already present as a reflection above his shoulder, watching him learn. This cartoon does not draw your attention to it. It does not need to. It simply places him there and trusts that most people will feel the attic is a little too still without ever knowing why. That stained glass window is worth holding on to because it belongs to a larger habit the series keeps. Bill's likeness is woven into the design of a rug inside the Mystery Shack's living room. One of several recurring background objects, the attic window among them used to hide his shape in plain sight through the run of the cartoon. Think about how domestic that is, not a dark cave, not a ritual chamber, but a rug on the floor of the family living room, the kind of object a person walks across without ever looking down. The triangle is not lurking at the edges of Gravity Falls. He is furniture. He is part of the house the characters live in, pressed into the ordinary surfaces they touch every day, and that ordinariness is precisely what keeps him invisible. The pattern reaches past the attic and the living room and into individual episodes. In Irrational Treasure, broadcast in August of 2012, roughly 11 months before the formal reveal, Bill's image appears on the back of a playing card. A playing card is a small thing, glimpsed and gone, the sort of prop that exists to fill a hand or a table and never to be studied. And that is the point. The program keeps choosing objects that resist attention, cards and rugs and windows in single frames, because a secret you can hide inside a background is a secret you can keep for a very long time. Each one of these is a small promise the writers made to themselves early, a marker laid down in the confidence that the payoff was coming and that patient viewers, years later, would go back and find everyone. Then the game changes the terms of the mystery entirely, and it does so outside this series. In January of 2013, about 6 months before Bill's on-screen debut, Disney released an official browser game called Rumble's Revenge. Inside that game, there is an unseen, unnamed character, referred to only as the Triangle Guy, and he writes 12 cryptogram messages scattered through the play. On their own, each message is a puzzle to be solved for its own small reward, but the design runs deeper than any single message. If you take the capitalized letters across all 12 of them and read them in order, they spell out a short sentence. My name is Bill. Sit with the strangeness of that for a moment. Half a year before he ever appeared in an episode, before Dreamscapers, before he had a face on screen or a line of dialogue, Bill Cipher told you his name himself. He did it through a character you never see in a game separate from the series, in a code that required you to collect 12 fragments and align them just so. The introduction the series treats as a grand reveal had, in effect, already happened, delivered not by the narrative but by the villain speaking around it. He announced himself in the one voice Gravity Falls reserves for him, the voice of the puzzle, and he trusted the audience to be the kind of people who would assemble the pieces. That is the shape of this whole hidden season. The formal debut in Dreamscapers is the door opening, and it is designed to feel like a beginning, but every fact we have walked through says the beginning was much earlier and much quieter. The triangle sat in the closing frames of every opening. He turned inside the journal on the first day. He watched from the attic glass while Dipper Red lay under the family's feet as a rug, hid on the back of a card in a mid-season episode, and finally, in a browser game months before his premiere, spelled out his own name one capital letter at a time. None of it was accidental. It was a long, deliberate act of patience, a villain assembled in the background of his own show, waiting more than a year for anyone to look up and notice he had been there the entire time. There is an episode near the close of the first season where this cartoon stops being about a town with secrets and becomes briefly about the architecture of a single mind. The 19th episode of that first season, titled Dreamscapers, first aired in the middle of July in 2013, and it served as the opening half of a two-part finale that concluded with Gideon Rises. What makes it the natural home for this chapter is not the spectacle it eventually reaches, but the machinery it softly installs. This is the episode that introduces the Dream Demon, gives him a name, and lays out the terms under which he operates. Everything the series later does with him rests on the rules established here, and the rules are the point. Consider first how the episode frames the mind as a locked room. Stan takes the deed to the Mystery Shack, the single legal document that proves the place is his, and he locks it away in his safe. Then he says, in effect, that the combination is hidden in the one location his enemy can never reach, which is Stan's own mind. It is a boast, and it is played as a boast, but it also functions as a premise. The cartoon has just told you that a person's mind can be treated as a vault, that thoughts can be stored the way a number is stored behind a steel door. Hold on to that image, because the entire episode is built to test it. If the mind is a vault, then the question that follows is inevitable. What happens when someone finds a way in? The someone in this case is Gideon. Before any of the supernatural machinery turns, we see him at the low point of an ordinary defeat. Stan has chased him off the property with a broom, a detail worth sitting with because of how small it is. There is nothing occult about a broom. It is as domestic a weapon as exists, and it reduces Gideon to a boy standing outside a window in the dark. Yet from that position of complete powerlessness, he mutters that Stan's mind is not as safe as he might think, and he uses Stan's given name, Stanford, when he says it. The line is a hinge. On one side of it is a child who has just been swept off a porch. On the other side is a child who's about to open a door that should never be opened. He opens it using a book. Gideon performs a summoning ritual out of the second journal, and through that ritual he conjures the dream demon Bill Cipher into being. What follows, before anything is decided, is a stretch of pure antics, the demon behaving as demons in this show behave, unbothered and theatrical. Then comes the transaction that the whole episode exists to stage. Bill agrees to invade Stan's mind, to go where the broom-wielding old man believed no one could follow, and in exchange, Gideon agrees to owe him a favor. The favor is unnamed. That is not an oversight in the writing. The demon deals in open-ended debt in a promise whose price is deliberately left blank, and the blankness is the trap. Gideon is so fixated on getting into the vault that he does not notice he has signed something without reading the amount. The program is careful to give you the opposing testimony at almost the same moment. While Gideon is learning what the second journal can summon, Dipper is consulting the third. He finds an entry on Bill, and the entry carries 2 explicit warnings. The first is not to summon him under any circumstances. The second is never to let him into your mind. Think about how those 2 warnings map onto what the episode is showing you. Gideon has just violated the first. Bill's proposed deal is aimed directly at violating the second. The author of that journal, whom later material identifies as Ford Pines, wrote those lines as a survivor, warning whoever came next, and by most fan accounts, that same warning about Bill still turns up in the wikis built around this series, telling readers to beware him and never let him into their mind alongside the command not to summon him at all costs. The words on the page and the words on the screen are the same words. The series is telling you the rule and breaking it in front of you within the same few minutes. There is a quieter thread running underneath all of this, and it is worth following because it tells you what the episode believes about Stan long before it goes inside his head. Earlier, Stan sends Dipper to deal with a bat that has frightened Seuss in the kitchen, and Dipper comes back from that errand injured. The task is trivial and the injury is real, which is a small and honest joke about what it costs to work for this man. Then, while Seuss tends to those injuries, he says something that lands with more weight than its silliness suggests. He calls Stan's personality one of life's great mysteries. And having said it, he immediately turns his attention to the question of whether it is possible to lick one's own elbow. The 2 thoughts sit side by side without irony. The unknowability of another person and a piece of pointless folk trivia are, for Seuss, questions of roughly equal size. It is funny, and it is also the thesis of the episode stated by the least likely character. Stan is a mystery. His mind is a place no one has mapped. And the plot is about to drop several people directly into it. The alarm is raised the way alarms in this show usually are, through witnesses who happen to be in the wrong place. Mabel and Seuss see Gideon's summoning ritual from behind a bush. They are close enough to understand that something has gone badly wrong and far enough to do nothing about it, so they run back to warn Dipper. Dipper, when they reach him, is sweeping the shack while Stan sleeps, which is a small image with a large amount of pressure inside it. The old man is asleep and defenseless, his mind about to be entered, and the person standing guard over him is a boy with a broom. The broom returns, you will notice. Stan used one to drive Gideon away at the start. Now the same humble object is all that stands between the sleeping man and the thing Gideon has unleashed. Once they piece the situation together, the 3 of them arrive at the only available countermove. They can stop the takeover by going in themselves, by entering Stan's mind after the demon, and they prepare to recite the incantation that will let them do it. That decision is where the episode turns its central metaphor inside out. The mind that Stan called unreachable is about to hold 4 visitors at once, 1 of them hostile and 3 of them family. The vault that was supposed to keep everyone out is now a space that anyone with the right words can walk into. And the mindscape, once they are inside it, is furnished with Gravity Falls' own past. Mabel and Seuss are still, at this late point in the season, fantasizing about Zyler and Kraz, the fictional teen heartthrobs the series introduced earlier, and those 2 figures surface again inside the dream logic of Stan's head. It is a strange and revealing choice. The interior of one character's mind is decorated partly with the daydreams of the characters who entered it, which suggests that a mind in this show is not a sealed archive, but a shared and porous place, colored by whoever happens to be standing in it. Now step back from the plot to the figure at the center of it, because his construction is as deliberate as anything in the writing. Bill Cipher's debut here was voiced by the series creator Alex Hirsch, and the performance was built on a specific and unlikely foundation. Hirsch based the voice on an impression of the filmmaker David Lynch. The reason the impression exists at all is that Lynch was reportedly offered the role and turned it down, so the creator performed his own version of the man he had wanted. That single fact tells you a great deal about the tone this cartoon was reaching for. Lynch is the director of dream sequences that feel wrong in ways you cannot name, of pleasant surfaces with something rotten underneath. And to borrow his cadence for a dream demon is to import all of that unease through the voice alone. The demon sounds friendly, the friendliness is the problem, The episode does not trust you to take that on faith, so it hides the character assessment in plain sight. During Bill's introduction, when his name appears on the screen, a second message is concealed in yellow text behind it, and when you decode that message, it reads as a 3-word description. Liar, monster, snappy dresser. Look at the order and the register of those words. 2 of them are grave, the vocabulary of warning, and the third is a joke about his wardrobe. And the joke is placed last so that it undercuts nothing. The cartoon is telling you exactly what he is while he is still charming you, and it is telling you in a code you have to work to read, which means the warning is available only to the viewer willing to do the labor. That is a recurring bargain in this series. The truth is present, but you have to earn it. And then, at the very end, the episode signs off with its most famous piece of hidden text. The end credits carry a numeric cryptogram, the kind that maps the alphabet onto numbers with A standing for 1. And when you convert it back into letters, it spells out 3 words: to be continued. It is a plain enough phrase, the sort of thing that could simply appear as ordinary text on any screen. The program chose instead to bury it in a cipher, which changes what it means. A visible "to be continued" is a promise to the casual viewer. A ciphered one is a promise to the viewer who has been decoding the credits all along, a private word passed only to the people paying that particular kind of attention. It rewards the exact habit the episode has been cultivating for the last several minutes, the willingness to treat every frame as a possible message. What the chapter leaves you with is a set of rules that will govern all that comes after, delivered inside a single, self-contained hour. A mind can be locked like a safe, and a lock like that can be picked. A demon deals in favors whose price he refuses to name, and a debt with no stated amount is the most dangerous kind. 2 warnings written by a survivor say, "Do not summon him and do not let him in." And within the same episode, both warnings are set aside, one by a defeated child and one by a demon reaching for a sleeping man. This series tells you who Bill is in yellow text you must decode, tells you the story is not over in numbers you must convert, and stages the whole thing as the first half of a finale, with the second half, Gideon rises, still waiting on the other side of that ciphered promise. The door has been opened, the rules for what comes through it have been written down. And the person meant to be guarding the vault is asleep, watched over by a boy holding a broom. There is a moment, familiar to anyone who has loved a story enough to want to hold it, when the fiction crosses over into the physical world and becomes an object you can carry. For Gravity Falls, that object arrived on the 26th of July in the year 2016, when Disney Press published a book called Journal 3. It was not a novelization, and it was not a companion guide in the ordinary sense. It was the journal itself, the one the author fills with his observations across the run of the series, reproduced as a 288-page artifact you could open on your own kitchen table. Alex Hirsch, who created the series, wrote it together with the supervising producer Rob Renzetti, and the pages were illustrated by Andy Gonsalves and Stephanie Ramirez. Think about what that gesture means. The prop that drives the entire mystery of Gravity Falls, the book characters chase and hide and bleed for, was handed to the audience to keep. The public answered. The standard edition became a New York Times bestseller in August of that same year, and it did not simply touch the list and fall away. It stayed there for more than 47 weeks, which is to say for the better part of a year, a children's tie-in book holding its ground among novels and memoirs, and the ordinary furniture of adult publishing. That endurance tells you something about the kind of attachment this cartoon had built. People were not buying a souvenir to glance at once. They were buying something they intended to sit with, to read closely, to work through page by page in the way you work through a puzzle rather than a story. And then, for those who wanted to go further, there was a second version. A Journal 3 special edition was announced and eventually released on the 13th of June, 2017, though that date was itself a small saga, having been postponed from an original plan of the 14th of February. It carried a retail price of $150, and it was limited to 10,000 numbered copies. That is a deliberately small number, and the market treated it accordingly. The edition sold out. Secondary reporting traces the very end of its availability to a final batch of 100 copies, bundled for sale through a site called the Mystery Shack, which ran out somewhere in the middle to late part of that June. After that, there were simply no more to be had at retail. 10,000 people, and no others held the numbered thing. What made that edition worth the price was not vanity. It was closer to the cartoon's own logic than the standard book could be. The special edition added content that the ordinary version did not contain, and much of that content was designed to be invisible until you knew how to look. There were additional pages that react to black light, printed on a faux parchment paper, meant to feel like something aged and secret. The cover was given a leather texture with metallic foil elements worked into it. Inside there was a tassel bookmark, and there were removable prop photographs and notes, loose things tucked between the pages as though the author had slipped them in himself and forgotten them. The book was not asking to be read so much as handled, disassembled, examined. The most telling inclusion was small and strange. The special edition came with a monocle-shaped magnifying glass, a physical prop accessory whose stated purpose was to help you read the smallest print in the book. Consider what that requires of a reader. You are not meant to skim this object. You are meant to lean in, to bring a lens to the page, to hunt for text that is deliberately too small for a casual glance. The book presumes patience. It presumes that you will treat it the way a scholar treats a manuscript, or the way a child treats a treasure map, which in Gravity Falls have always been closer to the same thing than we usually admit. The black light is where the real second layer lives. In the special edition, hidden ultraviolet reactive text is scattered through the book in a pattern that is uneven on purpose. In the first author section, roughly every other page carries something that only appears under the light. In the stretch written in Dipper's own hand, there is about one such page. And in the book's second author section, a couple of pages hold their own invisible marks. You cannot read the whole of the book at once. The standard reading gives you one text, and the light gives you another, threaded unpredictably beneath it, so that the act of discovery is spread across the whole length of the object rather than delivered in a single chapter. Some of what the light reveals is haunting in a quiet way. One of the blacklight-only messages hidden in the journal reads, in those exact words, "Search for the axolotl." The axolotl is a godlike figure from the program itself, a being spoken of in the mythology as something vast and possibly benevolent standing behind the events of the story. So here is a message written in invisible ink inside a prop from a children's cartoon, instructing the reader to search for a god. And the strange, honest truth is that fans have never reached agreement on what that instruction is actually meant to trigger. Whether it points to some real-world action, some further hidden thing, or whether it is simply atmosphere, a piece of the fiction's own unfinished mystery bleeding into the object, remains unsettled. The message is a door, and no one has agreed on whether there is a room behind it. The invisible symbols did not stop at plain sentences. Across the entire special edition, in that purple glowing ink, there were symbols scattered like seeds, and the fan community did what this series had trained it to do. They compiled them. They gathered every ultraviolet-only symbol they could find across all the pages and decoded the collection into a single sentence. What the sentence said was this: "Curse the axolotl, every conspiracy is true." Notice the tone of it. This is not a warm secret. Read one way, the book silently instructs you to seek the axolotl, and read another way, gathered from its scattered symbols, it turns and curses the same being and declares that every conspiracy is true. The object holds two opposed feelings toward its own god, and it makes you do the labor of assembling both before you can feel the contradiction. Underneath all of this sits a formal system, a real cipher rather than a mood. Journal 3 uses a symbol substitution wheel that mixes symbols drawn from Bill Cipher's in-show code with symbols from the author's own. Each symbol on the wheel maps to a number from 1 to 26, and that number is then read as a letter using the simple scheme where 1 is A and 26 is Z. It is a two-step translation. First, the symbol becomes a number, then the number becomes a letter, and only then does the hidden line resolve into English. The key to the wheel, the thing that makes the whole apparatus legible, is printed in the book opposite the page that bears the series' famous warning to trust no one. There is a dry wit in that placement. The instruction to trust no one sits directly across from the very key that lets you unlock the author's secrets, as though the book is reminding you that decoding a thing and trusting it are not the same act. The book did not arrive alone into the world. Its release was deliberately braided together with a real-world game. Just before the book came out, on the 20th of July that year, in the same week that carried the journal's publication, not long after the series itself had come to its end, Hirsch launched what was called Cipher Hunt. It was an alternate reality game, a scavenger hunt that reached across countries and across the boundary between the screen and the street. Players were sent chasing physical clues in real locations and online ciphers in equal measure. Following one to the next, the fiction's puzzle logic pulled out into the actual geography of the world. For roughly 2 weeks, people cooperated across time zones to read a trail that Hirsch had laid down. The hunt ended in a forest. Near Reedsport in Oregon, fans located what the trail had been pointing toward all along: a real buried statue of Bill Cipher, made of plexiglass, physically placed in the ground and waiting to be dug up. That, on its own, would be a fitting end to a game about a triangle-shaped demon. But there was one more detail, and it is the detail that stitches the whole chapter together. Buried alongside the statue was a treasure chest, and inside that chest was a copy of Journal 3 carrying original drawings by Alex Hirsch, and beside it, a black light. Sit with that pairing. The prize at the end of an international scavenger hunt was the book, and the tool for reading the book's invisible pages, placed together in the dirt of an Oregon forest. The real-world game and the real-world artifact were not two separate promotions. They were the same idea. The hunt taught you that the fiction hides things in the physical world, and the reward it handed you was an object that hides things in exactly the same way, requiring exactly the same lamp to reveal them. There is a final layer to Journal 3 as a physical thing in the world, and it is the least magical and perhaps the most revealing. A book that travels across borders stops being a single object and becomes many, discreetly altered to fit the places it lands. The international editions of Journal 3 were changed for their regional markets. The Russian edition censored certain imagery in order to comply with local law. The Spanish and Portuguese editions were republished so that the wording could be changed in notes that referenced suicide. These are not glamorous edits, they are the ordinary friction of a fictional artifact, meeting real jurisdictions, real cultural rules, real duties of care about what a book can say to a young reader. And yet they belong in the same story as the black light and the buried statue because they make the same point from the opposite direction. The book is a real object. It exists under law, under language, under the responsibilities of a publisher, and not only under the rules of the fiction that dreamed it up. That is the quiet double life of Journal 3. On one face, it is an elaborate toy, a prop lifted out of the screen and stuffed with tassels and foil and invisible ink and a little monocle to squint through. A puzzle box built to reward the patient reader with cursed and conflicting secrets about a cartoon god. On the other face, it is a mass-market book that climbed a bestseller list for nearly a year, sold out a 10,000-copy luxury run down to its final 100, and had its wording adjusted country by country so it could be sold at all. Both faces are true at once, and neither cancels the other. Gravity Falls spent 2 seasons insisting that the ordinary town of Gravity Falls was riddled with hidden meaning, if only you were willing to look closely enough. With this book, the creators did the same trick to the world outside this cartoon. They took an object you could buy in an ordinary store and they filled it with things you could only see in the dark. There is one kind of mystery that Gravity Falls loves best of all, and it is not the monster in the woods or the ghost in the store. It is the mystery of authorship. Who wrote the journals? Who drew the 6-fingered hand on their covers? Who knew enough about this town to fill 3 books with warnings and then vanish? In the 7th episode of the 2nd season, an episode called Society of the Blind Eye, the cartoon finally lets Dipper chase that question in the open, and it lets him get it almost entirely wrong. That wrongness is the point. To understand how the series plants its earliest concrete clues about the author's identity, you have to watch a smart boy build a beautiful theory out of real evidence and arrive at the wrong man. The evidence begins with a nameplate. Dipper and Mabel find the wreckage of a smashed laptop, and on that wreckage there is a small plate reading McGucket Labs. For Dipper, this is enough to light the fuse. If there is a laptop bearing that name, and if the town is full of strange machinery, then perhaps the muttering old man everyone dismisses is not a fool at all, but a genius in hiding. Perhaps Old Man McGucket is the author. It is a reasonable leap. Think about what a nameplate actually is. It is a signature stamped onto an object, a claim of ownership, the kind of small text a code hunter learns to read as a fingerprint. Dipper has been trained by 3 journals to treat every stray mark as a message, And here is a mark with a name on it. So he does what any careful investigator does with a growing pile of clues. He builds a board, Dipper keeps a bulletin board, a theory board, and on it he tracks the evidence about the author's identity as it accumulates. The standout item pinned to that board is a photograph of McGucket's arm in a cast, and beside it, the theory that a sixth finger might be hidden beneath the plaster. Follow the logic because it is genuinely elegant. The journals are stamped with a six-fingered hand. A six-fingered hand implies a six-fingered person. If McGucket is the author, then McGucket must have six fingers, and if his hand is in a cast, then the cast is exactly where a sixth finger would be conveniently concealed. The board turns an absence into confirmation. That is what a good conspiracy does. It reads the missing evidence as proof that the evidence is being hidden. I want to dwell on that board for a moment because it is the clearest picture the series has yet given us of how Dipper's mind works when it is hunting a code. He does not need certainty. He needs a pattern that holds together, and the six-fingered hand gives him a pattern. Every code breaker knows the danger here. When you're looking for a hidden signal, you begin to see signal everywhere, and the human face on a plaster cast starts to look like a locked drawer with a secret inside it. The program is not mocking Dipper for this. It is showing you the machinery of belief, the way a single nameplate can be spun outward into a full portrait of a hidden author. While Dipper assembles his portrait, the episode is gently building the real structure underneath it, and that structure is a society devoted to forgetting. Fiddleford McGucket, we learn, founded the Blind Eye Society in 1982. That is the first hard date the episode gives us, and it matters because a founding date turns a rumor into an institution with a history. The society exists to erase memories. Its method is precise and strange. A device fires a beam at a person, and the beam removes a memory, and the removed memory is captured inside a glass capsule, and the capsule is sent by pneumatic tube into an underground vault. The vault has a name. It is called the Hall of the Forgotten. Consider how much of this series' own logic is compressed into that image. A memory is not destroyed here. It is encoded, stored, filed away in a container, and sent down a tube to an archive. It is data in a vault, waiting to be read by anyone who can reach it. For a code hunter, this is a familiar shape. Nothing is truly deleted in Gravity Falls. It is enciphered and hidden, moved somewhere it cannot easily be found, and left intact for the patient searcher. That underground archive is a library of erased things, and like every library in this show, it can be walked back into. The Society's whole premise is that the past can be locked away. The episode's whole premise is that it can be unlocked. There is a small, quiet irony waiting inside that vault, and it belongs to the man in charge. At the time of the episode, the Society is led by a figure called Blind Ivan, and when he is pressed, Blind Ivan cannot say who actually founded the Blind Eye Society. Hold that up against the date we were just given. The organization was founded in 1982 by Fiddleford McGucket, and the man now running it has no idea. The society devoted to erasing memory has erased its own origin. Its leader guards a founding he cannot name. There is something almost gentle in how the series places that detail without underlining it, a machine of forgetting that has forgotten itself. For an audience hunting the author, it is also a warning. The people closest to the secret are often the ones who have lost it. The vault does not give up its contents unobtrusively. When McGucket pulls his own memory capsule out of its place of honor in that vault, the act sets off the vault's security alarm. Notice the phrase, place of honor. Of all the capsules stored down there, McGucket's occupies a position of significance, which tells you that whatever he chose to forget, the society considered it important. And notice that recovering a memory is treated as a breach. To take back what was taken from you trips the alarm. The archive is designed to be added to and never withdrawn from. McGucket, reaching for his own erased past, becomes an intruder in the record of his own mind. What that recovered memory contains is the hinge of the whole episode, and it is where the code hunting finally pays out. The restored memory shows a younger Fiddleford McGucket, and in it he is working as the assistant to a visiting researcher, a man who came to Gravity Falls and recorded his findings in a series of journals. Read that slowly because it subtly dismantles Dipper's board. The journals were written by a visiting researcher. McGucket was his assistant. The nameplate, the arm cast, the theory of the hidden sixth finger, all of it was built around the wrong role. McGucket did not author the journals, he helped the man who did. The episode reveals, in plain terms, that Fiddleford McGucket was an assistant to the author and not the author himself, and in doing so, it resolves the very theory Dipper spent the episode constructing. This is a remarkable move for a mystery to make. It hands you a genuine clue, the visiting researcher, the journals, the assistant, while simultaneously closing the door Dipper was leaning on. The author is real, the author came here, the author kept records, but the man on Dipper's board is not him. Gravity Falls advances the central question and corrects a wrong answer in the same breath, and it does so through a memory that had to be stolen back from a vault to be seen at all. The earliest concrete clues about the author's identity arrive not as a triumphant discovery, but as the demolition of a mistaken one. Inside that same flashback, there is a smaller code, buried the way this show loves to bury things, and it rewards exactly the kind of viewer who pauses and rewinds. With his head stuck through the portal, young McGucket shouts a line that sounds like nonsense. He cries out, "Yero Xerx V, Gerzumtov," while forming a triangle over one eye with his fingers. On first hearing it is gibberish, the raving of a man whose mind is coming apart. But the letters are not random. Apply the @bash cipher, the simple substitution where A trades places with Z, B with Y, C with X, each letter mirrored across the alphabet, and run it through the phrase letter by letter, and Yro Xerxv Gerzumtov resolves into Bill Cipher Triangle. The warning was there the entire time, spoken aloud, hidden only by a cipher a patient viewer can crack with a pencil. And the gesture completes the message. As he shouts the coded warning, McGucket peers through triangled fingers held over one eye, and that shape is not decoration. It mirrors Bill Cipher's single triangular eye. The words name the thing, the hands draw the thing. A man with his head inside the portal is trying to warn the world about a triangular entity, and he is doing it in two languages at once, one spoken in cipher and one drawn in the air. For a chapter about reading this episode through a code hunting lens, this is the purest example this cartoon offers. The clue is encoded twice, in letters and in a gesture, and both encodings point at the same name. There is something worth sitting with in the fact that this warning is the memory McGucket chose to erase. He looked through the portal, he understood enough to shout a coded warning about Bill Cipher, and then he took that knowledge and had it removed and filed away in a place of honor among the forgotten. The single biggest thing he learned became the thing he most needed to forget. And it takes his own hands, tripping an alarm, to pull it back. The episode keeps one more thread taut in the background, and it belongs not to McGucket, but to the machine itself. Beneath the mystery shack, the portal is growing stronger. At one point, it reaches out and yanks a notepad, a pen, and a mug straight out of Stan's hands and into itself. Small objects, ordinary objects, pulled from a man's grip by something gathering power below. And the episode closes on Stan, alone at the same machine McGucket once operated. It is powerful enough now to injure him as it drags objects toward the portal. Think about the symmetry the cartoon is drawing here without saying a word about it. The assistant, McGucket, once worked at that machine, and looking into it cost him his mind, so much that he chose to forget. Now another man stands at the same controls, in secret, taking the same risk. The past and the present are operating the identical machine, and the program simply lets you notice. Society of the Blind Eye aired on the 27th of October 2014 on Disney XD, the 7th episode of the second season and the 27th episode overall. By this point, the series had trained its audience to hunt, and this episode is where the hunt turns concrete. It gives you a founding date, a vault, a stolen memory, and a visiting researcher who wrote the journals. It gives you a cipher you can actually solve and a gesture that names your enemy. And it gives you the discipline every code hunter eventually has to learn, that a beautiful theory built from real clues can still be pointed at the wrong man, and that finding the author begins here, with the quiet correction of realizing McGucket only worked for him. Consider the first image this series ever hands you. Before Dipper Pines is anyone in particular, before Gravity Falls is a place with a history, he is walking through the forest and he finds a hollow metal tree, and inside it there is a book. On the cover of that book, pressed into the surface, there is a hand with 6 fingers. This is the series premiere, the episode called Tourist Trapped, and it aired in June of 2012. The man to whom that hand belongs, Ford Pines, will not be named on screen for more than 2 full seasons. Think about the patience that requires. A show puts its central mystery on the cover of a book in its opening minutes, holds it up plainly, and then simply waits, for years, for you to understand what you have already seen. The 6-fingered hand is not the only thing you have already seen by that point either. It sits on the wheel of 10 symbols that belongs to Bill Cipher, the Zodiac, and that wheel flashes across the screen for roughly 1 second at the very end of the opening title sequence. That title sequence runs from the very start of the series, so every single time you watch an episode, before the story even begins, the hand is there, spinning past you inside a wheel whose meaning will not be explained until the finale called Weirdmageddon, a clue you rewatch dozens of times without registering. That is the peculiar honesty of this show. It does not hide the answer from you so much as it shows it to you before you have any way to read it. The production history makes that honesty even clearer. In the audio commentary for the episode The Time Traveler's Pig, the series' creator, Alex Hirsch, described the original animatic version of the opening titles, the rough draft that comes before the finished animation. In that early version, the titles displayed a plain 6-fingered hand image, alongside the number 3 and the Zodiac symbols, before it was changed for the broadcast version that actually aired. So the hand was there from the earliest sketches of Gravity Falls' front door. It was not a detail added later once the writers had figured out where they were going. It was load-bearing from the beginning, so much so that it lived in the title card while this cartoon was still being assembled. Hirsch has said this outright in public more than once. The idea that Stan Pines had a secret twin brother was, in his words, the plan from the very beginning. The clues, he has said, were sprinkled since the very first episode, both in the text of the cartoon and in the subtext. That word, subtext, is the one to hold on to. Because the 6-fingered hand is text, it is a picture sitting there for anyone to see. The harder, quieter clues are the ones woven into behavior and objects, the ones you can only read once you know the ending, and the first season is thick with them. Take the second episode, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, which aired at the end of June in 2012. Stan has a boat, and on that boat there is a vanity plate. The plate reads the letters that spell out, in that compressed way vanity plates do, the word Stanley Mobile. But the character has been introduced to us going by the name Stanford. The plate says Stanley. The man is called Stanford. In the moment, you read past it if you notice it at all, as the kind of throwaway gag the program is full of. Hirsch later confirmed that the mismatch was intentional, an early hint planted before the twin reveal. 2 names attached to one man who should only have one, sitting on a license plate in the second episode this series ever made. The answer was on the bumper the whole time. The next episode, Headhunters, gives you a clue of a different kind, one made not of letters but of feeling. Mabel builds a wax figure of Stan, and by mistake the figure is beheaded, and Stan reacts with distress that is wildly out of proportion to what has happened. It is a wax dummy. His grief and his rage are the grief and rage of a man who has lost something that actually mattered. Hirsch later pointed to that overreaction as a planted clue, a signal of Stan's unresolved guilt over losing his twin brother. And this is the kind of foreshadowing that only exists in hindsight. On first watch, it plays as a joke about a strange old man being strange. On rewatch, once you know what Stan carries, it becomes something close to unbearable to watch, because you understand that the series was letting you see his wound years before it told you the name of the person he lost. The comedy was the disguise. The pain underneath was real, and it was pointing somewhere. Then there is Dreamscaperers near the end of the first season, which aired in July of 2013, well over a year before the twin reveal. Lil Gideon has Bill Cipher enter Stan's mind to search it. Gideon says the name Stanford Pines, and Bill goes looking. And for a brief moment, an image flashes across Bill's face. It is a face, but it is not Stan's face. It is Ford's face. Gravity Falls, asked for Stanford Pines, pulls up the wrong man, or rather the right man, the man that name truly belongs to, and shows it to you for an instant before moving on. And in that same sequence, among the fragmented memories inside Stan's mind, there is a broken swing set. A swing set built for 2 children. Hirsch cited that swing set as a planted visual hint of a lost childhood companion, later revealed to be his twin, Ford. A swing set for two, broken, buried in the ruins of an old man's memory. You do not need the twist to feel the sadness of that image. You only need the twist to know exactly who the second swing was for. It is worth pausing on how deliberate the whole architecture is, because this cartoon trained you to look for hidden things from the very first episode in a way that has nothing to do with the twins directly. The end credits sequence has carried a coded cryptogram in every episode since the first season. The first 6 episodes use one kind of cipher, a Caesar cipher, where letters are shifted along the alphabet. The next stretch of episodes, 7 through 13, switches to an @bash cipher, where the alphabet is reversed. Then episodes 14 through 19 move to a system that turns letters into numbers by their position in the alphabet. The specific methods matter less than the fact of them. From episode 1, the cartoon is softly promising you that there are solvable secrets hidden in plain sight, that the surface hides more than it shows, that a patient viewer with a pencil can find more than a casual viewer will. It teaches you to distrust the surface, and once you are trained to look, the twin clues are waiting. Even the shape of the Season 1 stories carries the pattern if you stand back far enough. Critics and recap writers have pointed out that so many of the early Weird Object episodes circle around the idea of duality, of one thing becoming two. In Double Dipper, there is a copy machine that clones Dipper, producing multiple copies of a single boy. In Carpet Diem, there is a carpet that swaps bodies, a device that by its very nature requires 2 people to function because you cannot swap one body with itself. Read in the moment, these are just the Monster of the Week premises of a show about a strange town. Read in retrospect, they look like the season rehearsing its central idea over and over in miniature. One person doubled, 2 bodies, and the confusion of which self belongs to which. The 2 stands twist was being played out in the machinery of the plots long before it was spoken. All of this seeding pays off in the second season, in the episode A Tale of Two Stands, which finally tells you where the 6-fingered hand came from and why it was ever the emblem of the whole mystery. In flashback, you learn that young Stanford Pines was mercilessly bullied by the other children, specifically for being born with 6 fingers on each hand. The thing that marked him as strange to cruel children became the thing that defined the rest of his life. Because that same episode tells you that Stanford's fascination with anomalies, with the things that do not fit, and especially with his own anomalous 6-fingered hands, is what drove his research. It is what sent him searching for the place with the highest concentration of anomalies in the world. It is what led him to Gravity Falls, so the loop closes. The hand on the cover of Journal 3, the first image the program gave you, is not a random glyph chosen to look mysterious. It is a self-portrait. Ford put his own hand, the hand he was tormented for, the hand that made him feel like an anomaly, on the cover of his life's work, because his own strangeness was the seed of everything he became. When Dipper pulls that book out of a hollow tree in the first episode, he is holding the answer to a question this series has not asked yet. The mystery and its solution arrive in the same object in the same minute, separated only by the years it takes you to learn how to read. That is what makes the rewatch feel less like catching mistakes and more like receiving a letter that was addressed to you all along. And only now do you have the key. There is a single frame that most viewers of Gravity Falls have seen hundreds of times without ever truly seeing it. It arrives at the very end of the opening title sequence in every episode of the series, a flash of an image so brief that the eye registers it as texture rather than information. In that flash, Bill Cipher sits at the center of a circle, and around him, arranged like the hours on a clock, are 10 small symbols. A pine tree, a shooting star, a question mark, a bag of ice, a fez, a 6-fingered hand, a llama, a stitched heart, a pair of glasses, a pentagram, 10 drawings no larger than coins ringing a floating triangle. For most of the series' run, this was the most heavily rewound second of animation on the internet, and the people rewinding it were right to bother. Consider first what it means for a piece of information to be hidden in plain sight this way. The credits are the part of a show a casual viewer skips, and yet the credits are also the part that never changes, the part that repeats with the reliability of a heartbeat. To bury a prophecy, there is to bury it where everyone will pass it and almost no one will stop. Gravity Falls was betting, in a sense, on its own most devoted audience, on the small fraction of people who would freeze the frame and lean in close and ask what a bag of ice was doing next to a fez. That fraction existed, and they set to work. And the work they did is the real subject of this chapter. The circle is called the Zodiac, and like the older Zodiac it borrows its name from, each of its symbols stands for a figure. The pine tree is Dipper Pines, and once you know that, the choice feels almost too plain to have been a puzzle at all, the surname sitting right there in the shape. Think about how a good cipher works, though. It is not meant to be unbreakable. It is meant to feel obvious the instant after it is solved and impossible the instant before. The pine tree is a name folded into an image, and the pleasure of it is the pleasure of recognizing something you were looking at the whole time. Beside the pine tree in the wheel's logic is the shooting star, and the shooting star is Mabel Pines. Here, the connection is not the name, but the wardrobe, the kind of thing a viewer arrives at only by paying attention to what a character actually wears from scene to scene. The shooting star is one of Mabel's sweaters made into a glyph, her whole restless brightness compressed into a single streaking line. And this is the pattern that begins to emerge as you go around the ring. Some symbols are names, some are clothes, some are objects a person carries, or a trade a person keeps. And the fun of the wheel is that no two of them encode their meaning the same way. The question mark belongs to Suze Ramirez, and it is perhaps the gentlest of the 10, a shape that says something true about the man without pretending to be clever. The bag of ice belongs to Wendy Corduroy, and this one rewards a viewer who has thought about her temperament rather than her appearance. The ice is tied to the way she stays calm under pressure, the coolness in her that never seems to crack no matter what this cartoon throws at her. A bag of ice is an odd thing to hang on a teenager until you understand it is not describing what she looks like. It is describing how she behaves when everything around her is coming apart. The fez is Stan Pines, and of all 10, this may be the plainest, because it is simply the hat he wears. The man who runs the Mystery Shack wears a fez, and so his symbol is a fez. And there is something fitting in the plainness of it. Stan is a character who hides an enormous amount, and yet his emblem on the wheel is the one thing about him that is never concealed, the object sitting on his head in nearly every scene. A recent telling on this channel followed his relationship with money, the hoarding, and the schemes, and it is worth setting that aside here, because the fez asks a different question. It asks not what Stan wants, but simply what he shows the world. And what he shows the world is a hat, a costume, a performance of himself. Then comes the symbol that did more than any other to prove the wheel was worth studying. The six-fingered hand belongs to Stanford Pines, the brother the audience did not yet know existed. On the covers of his 3 journals, the ones Dipper spends the first season poring over, there is a hand with 6 fingers and a number at its center. The hand is Ford's signature, his mark, the thing he printed on his life's work. And the hand was there in the credits, spinning past in that one frozen frame, long before the cartoon was ready to say whose it was. This is the moment the fans earned their reputation. Studying the flash frame from the opening, they correctly matched the 6-fingered hand to an unseen character months before Stanford Pines was formally introduced in the Season 2 episode called A Tale of Two Stans. Stay with that for a moment. The program had a secret at its very core, a hidden twin, an author of the journals whose identity was the engine of the whole mystery, and a group of viewers reached into the credits and pulled the shape of him out before the writers chose to reveal him. They did not know his name, they knew his glyph, and they knew that glyph pointed at someone the story had not shown them yet. That is a remarkable thing for an audience to do, and it is only possible because the information was genuinely, honestly there. The remaining 4 symbols round out the circle with this series' wider cast. The llama is Pacifica Northwest, and its origin is one of the odder threads in the whole design, because the llama traces back to a llama design on one of Mabel's sweaters. A pattern on the clothing of one girl becomes, somehow, the emblem of another, the rich and prickly rival who does not seem to belong in the same visual family as the shooting star at all. The stitched heart is Robbie Valentino, and this one is his hoodie made into a mark. The heart with stitches graphic he wears turned into his place on the wheel. The glasses are Fiddleford McGucket, and the pentagram is Gideon Gleeful, the small, sweet-faced antagonist whose symbol carries a weight the others do not, a shape with a long history of meaning trouble. Now, if all of this feels like a design of extraordinary foresight, like a plan laid down at the very beginning and executed with perfect discipline, the truth is stranger and I think more interesting. The Zodiac symbols were originally just a random assortment of images. They seem to have been drawn from whichever early episodes had already been produced, pulled together without any grand scheme behind them, images that happened to be lying around. There was no prophecy at first. There was only a triangle and a ring of pictures that looked mysterious, because mysterious was the mood the credits wanted. What happened next is the part worth slowing down for. Fans became fixated on decoding the wheel. They treated it as though it meant something because everything about its presentation told them it should, and their fixation became a kind of pressure on the series itself. And Alex Hirsch, the creator, decided to retroactively write the symbols into Gravity Falls mythology. The meaning came after the image, not before it. The audience believed there was a code, and their belief was answered by the story bending to make one real. Follow that through. The prophecy was not discovered by the fans. It was, in a sense, created by them, willed into existence by the sheer intensity of their attention, and then ratified by a writer who was generous enough or clever enough to say, yes, you are right. There was always a plan, even though there had not been. I find this genuinely moving, and I want to be careful to mark it as my own opinion rather than a fact about this cartoon. There is a version of this story where the retroactive part feels like a cheat, like the magician showing you the card was up his sleeve the whole time. But that is not how it lands. It lands as a collaboration, a loop between the people making the thing and the people watching it, each one raising the stakes for the other. The fans looked hard enough to find meaning that was not there, and their looking summoned the meaning into being. That is not a flaw in the design. That is the design becoming something larger than any one person could have drawn. The circle first steps out of the credits and into the story in the episode called Dreamscaperers. It aired on the 12th of July, 2013 as the first half of the season 1 finale. And it is there that Bill Cipher is first shown on screen surrounded by the Zodiac circle rather than only in the frozen flash of the opening. This is the hinge. For most of the first season, the wheel is a thing outside the narrative, a decoration, a puzzle the cartoon wears on its sleeve. In Dreamscaperers, it crosses over. The symbol that had been hiding in the title sequence steps into the light of an actual scene, and the audience that had been decoding it in private is finally told in effect that yes, this matters, this belongs to the story, keep watching. And then, at the very end, the program pays the whole thing off. In the series finale, Ford spray paints the Zodiac wheel onto the floor. He explains that it is a prophecy, and the shape of the prophecy is this. If the 10 people who correspond to the 10 symbols stand each on their own mark and hold hands, they generate enough combined power to defeat Bill Cipher. Everything the fans had been assembling from a single flash frame, the whole map of who stands for what becomes the literal mechanism of the ending. The pine tree, the shooting star, the fez, the six-fingered hand, all of it is no longer trivia. They are positions on a floor, and standing in the right position is how the world is saved. There is a rare satisfaction in a show that turns its Easter eggs into machinery, and Gravity Falls does it here with unusual nerve. Most hidden details stay hidden details. They are rewards for the attentive, small confirmations that the makers cared, and they never touch the plot. The Zodiac is different. The Zodiac graduates. The thing you were meant to notice in the corner of the credits becomes the thing the entire finale depends upon. And every viewer who had memorized the ring of symbols suddenly finds that their memorization was not idle, it was rehearsal. But this series is too honest to let the ritual work on the first try. The Resistance's first attempt to complete the Zodiac fails, and it fails for a reason that has nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the people involved. Stan and Ford's argument breaks the circle before Bill can be stopped. The two brothers, whose symbols sit side by side on the wheel as the fez beside the six-fingered hand, cannot hold the line, and their old wound reaches up through the ritual and tears it open at exactly the moment it needs to hold. The prophecy requires 10 people to hold hands, and the holding of hands is not a technical requirement. It is an emotional one. It asks these particular 10 people to set down whatever divides them for long enough to complete a circle. and the two who have been divided the longest cannot do it in time. This is the detail I keep returning to. A wheel that began as a random assortment of images that was given meaning only because fans demanded meaning, ends by testing not the power of its symbols but the willingness of the people behind them. The six-fingered hand and the fez were the two glyphs that carried the series' deepest secret, the buried brother and the man wearing his life as a costume. And it is precisely those two who cannot join hands when the moment comes. The prophecy does not fail because it was wrong. It fails because the people are people, and people who have hurt each other do not stop hurting each other simply because a floor has been painted with the right shape. So the flash frame at the end of the credits turns out to have been a promise all along, even if it did not know it was a promise when it was first drawn. 10 symbols, each one a person, each one encoded a different way, a name here and a hat there and a temperament somewhere else. A puzzle that fans solved before Gravity Falls was ready to be solved, pulling an unseen character out of a spinning ring of coins. A meaning that did not exist until enough people believed it did. And an ending that took all of it, the pine tree and the shooting star and the bag of ice and the stitched heart, and made it the literal shape of salvation, only to show that the shape means nothing without the hands willing to complete it. The eagle-eyed fans were right about everything they could see in that frame. What they could not see, and what the finale finally revealed, was that the wheel was never really a machine for defeating a demon. It was a machine for finding out whether 10 people could stand together long enough to try. By the time the story reaches its final act, the shape of the ending is already set. In Weirdmageddon, the first part of the 3-part finale, Bill Cipher returns to attack the Pines family, and he does not come alone. He brings other creatures and allies with him, a small army gathered to help him take the family down. This is where this cartoon stops being a mystery and becomes a siege. And it is worth sitting with that for a moment, because everything hidden in these last episodes, every reversed voice and buried cipher, is planted in the middle of a story about a family being hunted. The turn comes in the 3rd part, Take Back the Falls. Ford discovers Bill Cipher's true motives before the final confrontation, and that discovery is what makes the ending possible. Knowledge in this show has always been the weapon and the wound. Ford spent decades chasing what Bill was, and the cost of that chase filled other chapters of this series. Here, the knowledge finally becomes useful. He understands what Bill actually wants, and understanding it lets the family set a trap. The confrontation that follows decides the family's ultimate fate, and it demands their greatest sacrifice. The cartoon does not let them win cleanly, it makes them give something up. Now listen closely to what happens at the very end of that confrontation, because this is the first of the hidden things, and it is the strangest. Bill is being erased. Inside Stan's mind, the creature who has haunted the whole series is coming apart, unmade from the inside. And as he dissolves, he speaks a final line. On first listening, it is gibberish, a garble of sound, the noise of something breaking. But it is not gibberish, it is a message recorded backward. Played in reverse, it resolves into words, and the words are these. Axolotl. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. Notice what he is doing. In the exact moment of his destruction, the character is not screaming or begging. He is casting something. He is speaking a formula, a small incantation aimed at a being called the Axolotl, asking for the power to come back. The program buries this under the surface of the audio so that a casual viewer hears only distortion, and only someone willing to take the sound apart and run it backward hears the prayer. That is a remarkable choice. It hides a possible resurrection inside the sound of a death, and it does it without a single line of dialogue on screen to point at it. The clue is the death itself, if you know how to listen. The word at the center of that reversed message, axolotl, is not decoration. It is a key in the fullest literal sense, and the series uses it as one. When the end credits of Take Back the Falls roll, there is a cryptogram waiting, the kind the series has trained its audience to expect after every episode. But this one does not yield to the usual simple substitution. It needs a keyword, and the keyword is axolotl, the same word Bill breathes as he burns. To find it, you have to have been paying attention earlier in the finale because the word appears written on a doorframe inside the ruined mystery shack, glimpsed in the wreckage, so the puzzle spans the whole episode. You hear the word hidden in reversed audio, you see the word scrawled on a broken doorframe, and then, in the credits, you are silently asked to bring those two sightings together and use the word to unlock the last message. When you do, the cryptogram decodes to 3 words: "Goodbye, Gravity Falls." There is a gentleness in that, and also a kind of grief. The whole apparatus of this series is puzzle making. The substitution ciphers that closed nearly every episode is turned one final time, and the thing it spells is a farewell, not a threat, not a twist. A goodbye addressed to the town and to the audience that learned to read these codes together. The keyword that opens it is the same word a dying god uses to try to save himself. So the mechanism of resurrection and the act of saying goodbye are locked to the same key. That is not an accident. Somebody built it that way. If the reverse message and the credit cipher are the series speaking discreetly to itself, the next thing is Gravity Falls reaching out of the screen and into the real world. After the credits, there is one more scene. It shows a statue, and the statue depicts Bill Cipher's petrified physical form, the shape his body took when the story turned to stone around him, partially buried in the ground. But this is not an animated shot. It is a real-life object, filmed in a real-world forest, half sunk into actual dirt. For a series so committed to hidden meaning, this is a different order of hidden thing. It is not a code inside the fiction. It is a photograph of a physical object that exists, dropped into the last seconds of the finale with no explanation. A viewer watching in the summer of that year would have seen a real statue in real woods and been left to wonder where those woods were. That was the point. The shot was a launch clue. The creator of the series, Alex Hirsch, used that post-credits image to begin something he called Cipher Hunt, a real-world scavenger hunt for the physical Bill Cipher statue. The statue in the forest was genuinely out there, hidden somewhere on the actual planet, and finding it became the goal of an international search. The finale did not end on the screen. It ended by sending its audience outside into the daylight to look for a thing this cartoon had made and then hidden in the ground, and the finale gave more than one thread to follow. Somewhere in the episode, there is a cryptogram visible on a bus seat sitting in the background, easy to miss. This one does not use the substitution method or the axolotl keyword. It is built with a Visionaire cipher, a more involved technique, and when it is solved, it reads, "Secrets lost and statues found beyond the rusty gates." Read that as what it is, a riddle pointing outward. The word statues is plural and physical. The phrase "beyond the rusty gates" sounds like directions to a real place. So a fan willing to freeze the frame on a bus seat and work through a Visionaire cipher would find not a piece of the story, but a hint toward the hunt happening in the real world. The cartoon layered its farewell so that even a background prop was a doorway out. The hunt itself ran for about 2 weeks. It began on the 20th of July and ended on the 2nd of August of that same year. Across those days, Alex Hirsch posted clues online, and those clues sent fans to real locations spread across multiple countries. Picture the scale of that. A cartoon ends, and in response, people in different parts of the world are physically traveling to specific places because an animator is leaving a trail of hints. The fiction had trained its audience for years to decode, to freeze frames, to run audio backward. The hunt simply took that trained attention and pointed it at the surface of the earth. The statue was found on the last day. On that final evening, Pacific time, the real Bill Cipher statue was dug up in the woods near Reedsport, Oregon. The person who found it first, who first photographed it and shared it, was a user on Twitter going by the name Shadow_Wolfwind. There is something fitting about the fact that a search full of ancient-sounding incantations and Visionaire ciphers ended with a single, ordinary person in the Oregon woods taking a picture and posting it. The god's petrified body, the thing Bill's dying prayer was meant to reverse, was located and photographed by a fan on an ordinary summer evening. The statue was not what it appeared to be, and the way it was made deserves attention. It looks like weathered stone, an aged thing that had been sitting in the forest for a long time. It was not stone at all. It was designed and built by a movie prop master named Fawn Davis, and he made it out of plexiglass. To sell the illusion of age, he applied glue and seeds to its surface so that real moss would actually grow on it over time. So the aging was genuine even though the material was not. A living layer of moss was invited to grow across a plastic idol shaped like a cartoon demon, so that when fans finally reached it, it would look as though it had always belonged to those woods. That is a beautiful piece of craft, quiet and patient, and it mirrors the program's whole method. Make something artificial. Then let something real grow over it until the seam disappears. The statue was not the only reward. Buried near it was a treasure chest, and fans dug it up. Inside were real objects. There were signed copies of Gravity Falls Journal 3, the in-world book made physical and put into the ground. There was foreign currency and a music box and USB drives and prop money from this series itself, the stand bucks that exist inside the fiction, printed and buried so they could be held. Think about that mixture for a moment. Real money from real countries sitting in the same chest as fictional currency from the series. A physical copy of a book that, in the story, contains the town's deepest secrets. The chest collapsed the line between the fiction and the world on purpose, the way the whole finale had been doing, one hidden layer at a time. The statue did not stay in Oregon. It was later relocated from those Oregon woods, and it now has a permanent home. It stands on display at the Confusion Hill roadside attraction in Piercy, California, where it can be visited. The object that began as a puzzle in the last seconds of a cartoon, hidden in real dirt, hunted across countries, and pulled from the ground on a summer evening, became a fixture you can drive to. The petrified body of Bill Cipher, the thing his reversed prayer asked to reanimate, did in a sense return. Not to power and not to the story, but to a roadside stop on the California coast, mossed over and standing still, waiting for anyone who followed the clues far enough to come and look at it. That is how Gravity Falls chose to end, not only with the family's sacrifice and Bill's erasure inside Stan's mind, but with a reversed incantation, a keyword scrawled on a broken doorframe, a farewell spelled out in the credits, a riddle on a bus seat, and a real object buried in the real world for its audience to find. The last message the Ciphers spell is goodbye, but the last thing this cartoon actually does is send you outside to dig. For most of this series, the mysteries have lived on a screen. A cipher freezes over the end credits, and you decode it, and the answer is another line of text. A symbol hides in the wallpaper, and finding it changes nothing you can hold in your hands. The cartoon trained its audience to hunt for meaning inside a rectangle of light. And then, one summer in 2016, Alex Hirsch did something that almost no creator of an animated series has ever done. He took the hunt out of the screen and buried it in the ground. The series had ended. The final episode aired, and near the very end of it, for only a moment, the camera glanced at something strange in the woods around the town. A statue. A physical, weathered statue of Bill Cipher, the triangular villain who had spent the whole run of the program trying to unmake reality. It sat there, half swallowed by the forest, as if it had always been there, as if the story you had just finished watching had left a fossil behind in the real world. Most viewers assumed it was a drawing, a last little joke rendered in the same ink as everything else. It was not a drawing. On the 20th of July, shortly after that finale aired, Hirsch confirmed the thing was real, that it existed somewhere on the actual surface of the Earth, and that anyone willing to solve a chain of puzzles could go and find it. He called the game the Cipher Hunt. Think about what that promise contained. Not a prize you could win by luck, not a code you could brute force from your bedroom, but a real object sitting in a real place, waiting for the first human being clever enough and stubborn enough to arrive. The reward for solving the puzzle was not information. The reward was a location. And the location was not around the corner. It was scattered, deliberately across the world. The first clue did not point anywhere near the American Northwest where this series is set. It pointed to Russia. Fans were sent to Kazan Cathedral in St. Petersburg, a real place with real stone, where something had been left for them to find. From there, the trail crossed a continent and an ocean to Kanda Shrine in Tokyo, Japan. Only after those two stops did the hunt turn toward the United States, where it would wind through a dozen more locations before it ended. Consider the sheer nerve of that opening. To solve this, the fandom could not be one person. No single fan was going to fly from St. Petersburg to Tokyo to Oregon on a summer whim. The game was built from its first move to force strangers who had never met to trust each other across 3 countries. Someone in Russia had to photograph what they found and hand it to someone in Japan, who had to hand it to someone in America. The puzzle was social before it was ever mathematical. And it was mathematical. The clues did not come in plain language. They came encoded, and Hirsch reached for nearly every method the series itself had ever taught its viewers to decode. There were Caesar ciphers, the old trick of sliding every letter a constant amount down the alphabet. There was the @bash cipher, where the alphabet is mirrored so that the first letter becomes the last. There were hexadecimal codes, numbers written in the base that computers use, waiting to be turned back into letters. There was invisible ink, messages that only appeared under the right kind of light. There were phone lines you could call, where a recorded voice would speak to you, except the audio had been reversed, so you had to record it and play it backwards to understand what it said. And there was, at one point, a jigsaw puzzle of 2,000 pieces, an image that meant nothing until it was fully assembled. Every skill Gravity Falls had gently built in its audience over 3 years, every late night spent with a pencil and a paused frame, was now being cashed in at once. The cipher hunt was the final exam for a school no one had known they were attending. The American leg of the trail ran through 12 sequential locations, each one leading to the next. There was Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta. There was Griffith Park in Los Angeles and Century City nearby. There was Piedmont Park and a post office in Portland and a gift shop at a roadside attraction called Confusion Hill in Piercy, California, a place we will come back to because it matters more than it seems to at first. The clues were sequential, which is a plain word for a demanding idea. You could not skip ahead. Solving the 10th location did nothing for you if you had not honestly solved the 9th. The hunt could only move at the speed of its slowest genuine solution, and it could only be carried by people willing to share what they learned rather than hoard it. For 13 days, that is exactly what happened. A loose, leaderless crowd of fans, most of whom would never meet, passed the torch from cipher to cipher and country to country. The statue at the center of all this deserves its own quiet moment of admiration, because it was not a mass-produced piece of merchandise. It was a genuine piece of craftsmanship, designed and built by a prop fabricator named Fawn Davis, who ran a company called Fonco Effects Unlimited, and it was commissioned by Hirsch personally. The construction is the detail I find most beautiful. The statue was built out of plexiglass, a clear, hard plastic, and then it was coated with a mixture of glue and seeds. Seeds. The idea was that once the thing was placed in the forest, moss and small green growth would take root in that coating and slowly cover the figure so that it would not look freshly planted. It would look ancient. It would look like it had been sitting in those woods for years, forgotten, exactly the way it appeared for that single second at the end of the finale. The prop was engineered to lie about its own age. It was designed to grow into the fiction it came from. And in front of the statue, buried in the earth, there was a treasure chest, because of course there was. When it was opened, it held the kinds of objects that read almost like a summary of this cartoon's whole spirit. There was a signed copy of Gravity Falls, Journal 3, the real published version of the mysterious book that drives so much of the series. There were plastic coins and gems, the fake riches of a children's pirate story. There was real money too, though from far away, Russian rubles and Japanese yen, small physical echoes of the 2 countries where the hunt had begun. There was a black light flashlight, the tool for reading the invisible messages. There was a plastic crown and a sash reading Mayor of Gravity Falls, props from the town's own small comedies. It was a chest that took the game seriously and also refused to take itself too seriously, which is a balance the cartoon itself struck for its entire run. But the object in that chest that mattered most was the smallest. There was a USB drive. And on that drive were 2 things. The first was an audio recording of the voice actor who played Grunkle Stan singing the old wartime song, We'll Meet Again, a song about parting and reunion given to fans at the moment the program was, in every real sense, saying goodbye to them. The second was a set of credentials, a key of sorts, granting access to something that had never been released to anyone. This series' original unaired pilot episode made back in 2010, before Gravity Falls was Gravity Falls. This was the true reward. As payment for completing the physical puzzle trail, Hirsch released the earliest version of the series. The rough first draft of the whole thing, a look at what the series had been before it became what everyone loved. The fans had dug up not just a statue, but Gravity Falls' own buried childhood. I want to be clear about who paid for all of this because it changes how the whole enterprise reads. Hirsch funded and organized the Cipher hunt himself personally without Disney's involvement. This was not a studio marketing campaign with a budget line and a team of coordinators. Disney owned this cartoon, Disney had aired it, and Disney had nothing to do with this. A single creator commissioned a custom statue from a professional prop house, hid a treasure chest, planted clues in 3 countries, and reversed audio onto phone lines out of his own pocket as a gift after the work was already over and the paychecks had stopped. There was no commercial reason to do any of it. That absence of a business motive is what makes the gesture feel like something closer to love than promotion. He was not selling anything. He was thanking people. The hunt ended on the 2nd of August, 13 days after it began. The statue was found in a forest near the end of South 22nd Street in Reedsport, Oregon. The final clues had led, at last, back to the Pacific Northwest, to the kind of quiet, wet, evergreen country that the fictional town was always meant to evoke. A Twitter user fans still remember reached the spot that evening, Pacific time, and posted a photograph confirming the discovery. After 13 days and 3 countries and every cipher the cartoon had ever used, a single photograph closed the game. Somewhere, a chain of strangers who had never coordinated in any formal way had together solved the whole thing. The statue was real. It had always been real. And now it had been found. That is where the story appears to end. And for 6 years, that is where most people believed it ended. But there is another layer underneath it, and it is the layer I find most human. Because it is about the game not quite working the way its designer intended. The statue had not, in fact, waited untouched for the fans. 8 days before the hunt officially began, on the 12th of July, 2016, a resident of Reedsport named Bradley Pick had simply stumbled onto it by accident. He was not a fan. He had never seen Gravity Falls. He had no idea what the strange, moss-covered triangle in the woods was, or why it was there, or that it was the centerpiece of a game that had not yet even started. To him, it was just an odd object in the forest, the sort of thing you photograph because it is strange. And so he did what a person in 2016 does with a strange thing. He posted the photograph to a Reddit community devoted to unsolved mysteries, asking in effect whether anyone knew what he had found. Here is where the accident nearly unraveled the whole design. That Reddit post was spotted by the person running a Twitter account called The Mystery of GF, someone paying close attention to anything connected to the program. They recognized instantly what Bradley Pick did not. That this ordinary man had accidentally located the ending of a game that Hirsch had spent real money to hide, days before the first clue was even released. They alerted Hirsch. The prize had been found before the hunt began by someone who did not know there was a hunt. What Hirsch did next is small and I think unobtrusively perfect. He did not panic and move the statue. He did not cancel anything. He reached out to Bradley Pick and asked him in effect to keep quiet, to hold the secret. And he asked him to do one active thing, to swap a USB drive in the treasure, updating what the eventual finders would receive. So this man who had never watched a single episode became briefly a silent caretaker of the ending, entrusted with keeping the illusion intact for thousands of fans he had never met, protecting a story he had no personal stake in. He agreed. He said nothing. For 13 days, the game ran as if the statue were untouched, as if no one had seen it. And the fans who eventually arrived had no idea that a stranger had been there first, standing in the same clearing entirely by chance. That full story did not become public until 2022, 6 years after the hunt concluded, when Hirsch finally told it. Think about the discipline that silence required from both men across all those years. An entire community celebrated a triumph that had a hidden asterisk sitting subtly behind it. And the 2 people who knew let them keep the clean version, because the clean version was the better story to live inside. The statue's life after the hunt was not entirely peaceful. which is a fittingly earthly ending for such a strange object. On the 3rd of August, the day after it was found, local authorities seized it over a dispute about who actually owned the land it had been buried on. It was moved, at first temporarily, to a place called Bicentennial Park in Reedsport. And then, between the 18th and the 20th of August, 2016, it was relocated for good to Confusion Hill, the roadside attraction in Piercy, California. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Confusion Hill was one of the 12 clue locations along the trail, a gift shop the hunters had already passed through on their way to the end. The statue did not just get parked anywhere, it came to rest inside the very game that had summoned it into the world, at one of the stops on its own map. It remains there today on public display, a real object anyone can go and stand in front of. A triangle of plexiglass once dressed in glue and seeds so it could pretend to be old, now truly aged by the years it has actually lived through. It began as a single frame at the end of an animated series, a thing most people assumed was drawn. It became the finish line of a puzzle that crossed Russia and Japan and the width of the United States. It was found once by accident, by a man who did not know the story, and then found again on purpose by people who knew nothing else. And it sits now at a roadside attraction in California, softly waiting, the way it was always designed to wait for whoever comes to look. Consider what it means for a show to trust the person watching it, not the person watching once, half asleep on a couch on a Friday, but the person who goes back, who pauses, who lets a single frame sit still on the screen long enough to read what is printed in the corner of it. Gravity Falls was built for that second person. The ciphers at the end of each episode are the famous part, the part everyone talks about. But underneath them runs a quieter layer, a layer of set, dressing, and props, and small painted details that were never meant to catch your eye the first time. They were placed to reward return. And once you know they are there, the world of this series stops feeling like a backdrop and starts feeling like a document, something written down long before you arrive to read it. Start with the sign on the roof because it is the easiest one to miss, precisely because it is the largest. The Mystery Shack has a name spelled out in big rough letters above the porch, and in the 3rd episode in Headhunters, Dipper has a fight up on that roof with a wax figure of Sherlock Holmes. During the struggle, the letter that reads S is knocked loose and left hanging at an angle. And here's the part that makes it a real detail rather than a passing gag. It never gets fixed. For the entire rest of the series, across 2 seasons, the establishing shots of the building show that letter still crooked. So the sign no longer reads Mystery Shack. It reads Mystery Hack. Once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. And there is something perfect about the fact that Stan, a man who runs a tourist trap held together with glue and lies, simply never climbs up to straighten it. The building tells the truth about its owner every single time the camera looks at it. Then there is the number. If you watch enough of these episodes with your eye moving to the margins, you begin to notice a figure that keeps coming back, worked into places where a number would be perfectly ordinary. The Mystery Shack sits at 618 Gopher Road. The total on the gift shop cash register is shown again and again as $6.18. And in Season 2, in Not What He Seems, when Stan is taken into custody, the number stamped across his prisoner uniform is 061800. The same 3 digits keep surfacing. It is not a plot clue. It points at nothing inside the story. It points outside the story at the man who made it, because the creator, Alex Hirsch, was born on June the 18th, 1985, and 618 is that date folded into the walls of his own show. Read that as an act of authorship. He signed the world the way a painter hides initials in the shadow of a curtain over and over in the register, on the road sign, on the clothing of his own character in the moment of that character's greatest humiliation. The strangest appearance of that number sits inside a monster. In Blendon's game, in the 2nd season, there is a creature with a single eye shaped like a clock face, and by most accounts, the time it shows is 618. It is the birthday again, this time staring back out of the design of a villain, hidden in plain sight in the one place you would least think to check the date. These are the kinds of details that make people re-watch a children's cartoon with the seriousness usually reserved for reading a difficult novel twice. Now consider the harder trick, the one the series pulls with its central villain. Bill Cipher does not physically arrive until near the end of the first season in Dreamscaperers, but he is not absent before that. He is planted. Look at the rug on the floor of the Mystery Shack gift shop and you can find his triangular shape and imagery worked directly into the pattern, sitting there under the feet of the characters in shots that predate his debut entirely. And look, in the attic, at the red stained glass window, the one Dipper sits beneath while he reads the journal. In episodes before Bill ever speaks a line, his form is visible in that red glass as a reflection, watching the boy study, present in the room before he is present in the plot. That is a really unsettling thing to have done. The demon who deals in secrets and in seeing was, the whole time, already in the house, woven into the floor and glazed into the window, and the audience walked past him for episodes without knowing his name. The same technique carries forward. Long before the reveal in Not What He Seems that there is a third Pines brother at all, Gravity Falls is silently telling you about him through a single printed symbol. In the middle of the first journal is a golden hand, and that hand has 6 fingers. It is a small thing, easy to read as decoration, one more piece of mysterious cover art on a mysterious book. But it is a portrait. The author of that journal has 6 fingers on his hand, and the symbol is his self-portrait pressed into the object he left behind. So the truth of Ford's identity, his polydactyly, is sitting in your hands every time Dipper opens the book, waiting for the moment much later when you finally understand that the strange golden hand was never a design. It was a description of a man. This cartoon does this with its secret societies too, and with its government agents, treating the background of a frame like a bulletin board where information gets posted before anyone is meant to read it. The Blind Eye Society, whose members erase memories, is not formally introduced until Society of the Blind Eye in the 2nd season. But their emblem, an eye with a line struck through it, appears earlier, graffitied onto a wall and onto a dumpster in the backgrounds of The Gulf War and Sue's and The Real Girl. The organization is tagging the town before you know the organization exists. Their symbol is loitering in the alleys of Gravity Falls the way real graffiti does, meaning something specific to the people who put it there and nothing at all to everyone who walks past. The 2 agents work the same way, only they are people rather than symbols, which somehow makes it stranger. Agent Powers and Agent Trigger are introduced in Scary-oke at the start of the 2nd season, and then they simply do not leave. They keep turning up as silent background extras, doing nothing, saying nothing, just present at the edge of scenes. In Sock Opera, they're hiding behind a playbill in the audience. In Sue's and The Real Girl, they are walking the upper floor of the mall. In Little Gift Shop of Horrors, they are moving between the booths at a swap meet. They are agents, so of course they are surveilling, and the joke is that the cartoon lets you catch them at it if you are the kind of viewer who scans a crowd. They are always there, you are simply not looking. And then, at the very beginning, there is the man in the bushes. This is the one that makes people gasp when it is pointed out, because it sits in the first episode, in Tourist Trapped, during the Gnome attack, and it means the program had its long game planned from the opening minutes. A background figure is briefly visible in the bushes, picking up a flower hair clip that Mabel has dropped. That figure is Blendin Blandin, a time traveler, and he is not formally introduced until the time traveler's pig, much later in the 1st season, so his first appearance is not his introduction. His introduction is his return. He was in the pilot, doing exactly the kind of thing a time traveler would be doing, moving discreetly through a scene that belonged to other people, collecting a small object nobody would miss. This series is confessing, in its first outing, that it already knows things you do not. The writers clearly loved this joke enough to comment on it inside the series itself. In the 2nd season, in A Tale of Two Stands, there is graffiti in the background that reads, "Blendin was here." It is a wink, an acknowledgement of the character's habit of appearing unexplained in the corners of episodes, a little note left on a wall for the viewers who had been tracking him all along. The creators are, in effect, admitting the game they have been playing and thanking you for playing it back. That same episode holds one more object that turns out to have been carrying its meaning gently the whole time. Back in the 2nd episode of the 1st season, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, Stan takes the twins out fishing on a wrecked, half-ruined boat, and the boat has a name painted on it. It is called the Stan o' War. For most of the series, that reads as a small vanity, an old man naming his sad little boat after himself. But A Tale of Two Stans reveals where the name really comes from. It comes from a boat that a young Stan and his brother Ford built together long ago on Glass Shard Beach in New Jersey. So the wreck the twins go fishing on is not just a boat, it is a relic, a piece of a broken relationship that Stan has kept and kept using. Its name a memory of a brother he lost, sitting there in the second episode years before you could possibly understand what it meant. You saw the whole story painted on the side of a boat in the second episode. You just could not read it yet. That is the pleasure Gravity Falls was built to give, and it gives it only to the ones who come back. The codes were never decoration. Every cipher in Gravity Falls, from the simple letter shifts of the earliest episodes to the layered substitutions that reward a viewer willing to pause and write things down, exists because this cartoon trusts its audience to look closer. A children's cartoon about a boy and his sister in a strange town chose to bury its meaning in plain sight. And in doing so, it made watching into an act of reading. The mystery of the author, the warnings hidden in the credits, the small confessions tucked beneath the animation, all of it asks the same quiet thing of you. Pay attention. What looks like background is often the message. What looks like a joke is often a grief held at a distance. The town keeps its secrets the way the cartoon keeps its ciphers, which is to say, openly, waiting. And so you are left with the image the series returns to again and again. A journal open on a table, its pages full of ink and diagrams, a hand turning them slowly in lamplight, following symbols toward something just out of view. The book does not shout. It simply sits there, patient, offering itself to anyone who decides the strangeness is worth understanding. Consider what that means for a story told to children. It tells them the world is written in a language they can learn, and that the learning is the point, and that the mystery was always meant to be solved by them. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.